Good evening. Welcome to the February 8th, 2011 regular meeting of the Fairfield Board of Education. Allison Raich is here, Mr. Perry Liu, Mrs. Sue Brand, Mrs. Stacy Zahn, Dr. Teitel, I'm John Mottola, Mrs. Iacono, Mrs. Albin, Mr. Carey, Mr. Fatabine, and Ms. Teixeira, correct? Welcome. And let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, can everyone please stand up for a moment of silence for former Selectman Carl Dickman? Thank you. Okay, we're on item number 3, approval of minutes. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 11th, 2011. Can I have a motion? Mrs. Brand, seconded by Mrs. Zahn. Any discussion? Yes, Mrs. Brand.
There was just one thing that I wanted to have a note of, please. When on the second page, be just above board questions and comments followed, I did have a very specific question relative to the, or actually comment relative to the description that the gifted program was using to identify gifted. I said it should include more than just intellectual.
Okay. Do you have that?
Yeah.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
we'll make that change. Anything else?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Abstain. Mrs. Zahn, there you go. Okay, thank you. Item number 4, student committee liaison reports. And first is Allison Reich. How are you? Reich, I'm sorry, I should know that. Reich. I'll get it by June.
Well, there's not really a lot to report today. Obviously, students survived midterms. And you have a lot of seniors are just hearing back from colleges at this point, but we're still waiting for April 1. And other than that, our girls' basketball team and our boys' wrestling team just started a drive to have like toothpaste and like toothbrushes and stuff for different charities. So if you want, you can donate to that at any point. And then that's about it for today.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to Fairfield Ward High School Student Liaison, Stephanie Teixeira.
Hello. Well, everything is going well at Ward. We just finished up with midterms, like Allison said. Report cards went out today. I am very pleased with mine. For academics, cheerleading got first place in FCX, and 3 girls were titled the FCX title. Boys and girls, Ludlow versus Ward basketball game is next Tuesday on the 15th, so go support. Wrestling has FCX on Friday, and the Ludlow match for wrestling is tomorrow. Also, we had like the 8th grade parents' night last week, and that went really well. We had about 700 people and 50 students involved. And also, the challenge, our school is going to be aired on the challenge. We defeated Amity and West Hill in the semifinals.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next, Mrs. Albin, any report?
No report. Neither of those have met.
Thank you. Mrs. Brand?
The same, no report.
Mrs. Dow's not here. I should note for the record that Mrs. Dow is still recuperating from her injury, and hopefully she'll be at our next meeting. Mr. Fatabine?
There are a couple transportation issues that arose. They convened the transportation safety advisors, and they're in the process of being decided.
Thank you. Mrs. Iacono?
I am pleased to report that the Special Projects Standing Building Committee went before the Board of Finance tonight, and the funding for the Sherman project was approved unanimously by the Board of Finance, and will now move forward to the RTM. They'll be in subcommittee next week, and then they'll be, the funding request will be voted on at the end of the month. So I would just like to thank everybody I've been working with on the Special Projects Standing Building Committee, because it's been really, really hard. As you know, we put forth a request and with a laundry list of items, and the full project cost for that was $4.4 million. And due to FEMA regulations, we were capped at spending $1.9 million. We went before the Board of Selectmen and asked for them to add in the soft costs above the 1.9. They agreed, bumped it to 2.2 million, and we were able to move forward. As I mentioned at the last meeting, we had whittled the project down to renovating the administrative area to address safety concerns and to better facilitate special education rooms, get some kids out of closets, and improve this nurses' facilities. If this is approved by the RTM, we'll be able to do the HVAC system throughout the school building, and we will also be able to add the second serving line in the cafeteria. So I am cautiously optimistic that this will move forward through the RTM, and am really pleased, and would like to thank the Board of Finance for working with us tonight, because they had a meeting concurrent with ours and knew that we needed to be present in that meeting, and worked with us for an earlier start time. So that's where we are in that project. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask me. And I don't have anything else to report on anything.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carey.
PTA Council did not meet this month because of weather, and in terms of our facilities meeting, I think I'm going to defer the majority of that to our discussion later on the agenda. However, one item that was discussed and will come before the board, I believe, at a later date, was that the sense of the body of this facility subcommittee was that we should have a further discussion about the enrollment projections that we've received from MGT. And I suspect that Mr. Mottola will have that on the agenda for us in the future.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Liu.
Talking about weather, I was talking with Bill Sapone, who's the chairman of the Fairfield Woods Building Committee, and he had some concerns whether the snow days that are going to eat into our April break would slow up or delay some of the construction there. But I know he's spoken with Dr. Teitel and Malikan Construction, and they're going to work around it at this point, so we're praying for no more snow. Will I hold up this project, since we're in a very tight deadline with this anyway? And the only other item is the litigation hearing has been postponed to March 3rd. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Liu. I don't have any reports. Parks and Rec met, but there is nothing that concerns us. Mrs. Zahn.
No report.
Okay, so now we are on item number 5, Superintendent's Report, District Improvement Strategy for the Fairfield Public Schools, and I will turn this over to Dr. Teitel.
All right, thank you. First, let me just follow up on Mr. Liu's snow day comment, because it's near and dear to my heart. And this is the time of year all superintendents suffer from sleep deprivation. But just so you know where we are with this, and I get emails on this, I try to address it on the blog as well. So we've had 6 snow days up to this point. Under the board's calendar, the first 4 snow days are made up at the end of June, which brings us to Thursday, June 23rd. At that point, any further snow days will be made up during the April vacation. So the 2 Monday and Tuesday of April break, school will be in session. There's one more day to make up that week, because we have a district holiday Thursday. It's in the calendar, and it's something the employees planned on, and so we have one more day into the April vacation. This is if there's a full school cancellation. As you probably know, if there's a delayed opening or an early dismissal, that counts as a day. We don't have to count the minutes. We don't have to count the hours per day. We actually could do a late opening and an early dismissal on the same day, and it would count. But that's where we are. Beyond that, we would simply have to tack days on to the end of the June. And we've got a very sternly worded letter from George Coleman, the acting commissioner, which I think we put in your packet, basically saying, don't ask for any exceptions. And there's also a prohibition, just in case people are nervous, that you cannot make up days on Saturdays or Sundays. So you're safe with that. You are allowed to make up days on holidays that don't fall in December and January. The only holiday really eligible for that would be Memorial Day. So that's where we stand right now. We got a nice clear stretch of weather. We're going to pray for no snow, but that's where we are with it at the moment. On the improvement strategy, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because the document's pretty, I think, explanatory. I don't have any fancy PowerPoint on it, but and I think we've made some copies. They're in the back if people want to see it. It's also posted on the website. And what I had been working on since I came here was kind of what we call an entry plan, trying to learn as much as I could about the school system in as quick a period of time as I could, spent time with many, many people individually, spending an hour with each of them, meeting with groups of folks, meeting with groups of parents, PTAs, small groups of parents, a large number of people. And at the same time, just learning as much as I could about the system through living in it and running it for 6 months. And bringing my own experience and background in, how do we, improve and move forward a complex enterprise as a school system with 10,000 kids and 1,500 employees. It's challenging. And so what I've outlined is a sort of a broad strategy. Some people would call this sort of the vision. So you're not going to see step-by-step detail about each area and what will happen next week in each of these areas. It's sort of a long view. It would be it's a multiple-year change effort. It's also an attempt to try to focus us a little bit. Because one of the things I found and really resonated with people when they read this, and I sent some drafts of this out to a variety of people to get feedback, was a feeling that the district has many, many initiatives going on, and it's really hard to do them all well. And so how can we really focus future initiatives that might come before us? How can we filter those to see whether they're worth spending our time on? And as some of these enterprises we have going finish their tour of duty, maybe they could be sunsetted. So part of this is to concentrate our limited resources into the areas that are most likely to bear fruit in terms of what we're trying to get done. So what I put before you is sort of what's the goal, what's the end that we should have in mind here, and then sort of a game plan for where I think we should concentrate our efforts going forward, and something that I will try to live by as well. So, and the other point to this is that we can't just simply sit on our laurels. No, we don't sit on laurels. I guess you rest on them. You sit on something. I can't say it. All right, okay, rest on our laurels, right? Because we have a good school system. We have a very good school system. I mean, the system's not broken. We don't need radical surgery on the patient here. But if we don't work on continuously improving it, we will fall behind, because if we stay the same and the world changes and expectations change, eventually you become obsolete. And you end up with a really good school system for 20 years ago. And that's not what we need to have. Though there's been too much change in the world, too much change coming. It's perfect that we have a little bit of the digital curriculum on the agenda, because that's really changed the world, dramatically into how kids learn. So the world is changing faster than we maybe would like, and so we do need to continue to change. But ultimately, keeping in mind the goal is student achievement. Right? That's the end we're searching for here, improved student achievement. So for my mind, in the big vision, not only do we offer a very comprehensive and rigorous program, but our kids actually achieve it. Because offering is just one part of what we need to do. We need to do everything we can to ensure kids actually master it. And some kids can master it without a lot of our help, and other kids need a lot more help to get there. And so if that's the end, if we keep the end in mind, then we have to start thinking about, well, what will pay dividends toward that end? And that's where I go through this sort of logic, and if you just walk through the diagrams that are in there, the first one is simply that, to me, the end of the game on this whole thing is improving instruction. That's going to have the biggest payback in terms of improving student learning. And so then the question then becomes, what is our best way to get improved instruction in the classroom to improve student learning? And I identify in here 4 areas that I think are most fruitful, and then a few thoughts about each one of those, and I'll just run through them very quickly. And they're all related, and it's not a perfect model for how things work, but concentrating on strengthening the skills of our teachers and staff needs to be a priority, particularly in the areas of analysis of student performance data and assessment, and using that, as well as technology and using that and working as teams. So we have a very skilled teaching staff. This is not a knock on our teaching staff or anybody. This is the areas where I think we can really get a bang for the buck, so to speak. Strengthening the skills of our school leaders. The school leaders are a critical linchpin to improving classroom instruction and student learning. Again, we have really talented school leaders, but everybody's skills can be improved. And that's actually something that falls into my bailiwick particularly. I spent quite a bit of time in here on alignment. When you've got a big system, it's important that things are aligned. Things aren't always going to be identical, but we want to look for the 2 kinds of alignment that I speak of. The horizontal alignment, that is to say, the second grade curriculum is common and taught commonly across all of our classrooms. That's sort of the horizontal alignment, that, you know, 3rd grade social studies at Sherman looks like 3rd grade social studies at Burr, looks like 3rd grade social studies at Dwight. The content is the same. There's always differences in individual teacher styles, but that we have that consistency horizontally through the system. And also vertically. That is to say that as children progress through the system, while there's always natural review and so forth, we need to make sure that there's alignment from kindergarten to 1st grade, 1st to 2nd, and the areas I point out as probably the biggest issues that came to me were the break points, the transition grades, 5th to 6th and 8th to 9th, as particular areas where the vertical alignment in all school systems tends to fall apart a bit. There's there's alignment issues everywhere with that. And I also look at trying to align improvement plans in the system. Every school does a school improvement plan, but what we haven't been able to get to, what we can get to, I think, fairly short order, is having some alignment between improvement plans we have at the district level, and then having that show a through line between that and improvement plans at the school level, at the department level, at the grade level, and then also at the teacher level. And there's a diagram in here about that. It's diagram 4 that shows how improvement plans can align from the teacher level all the way through the system. In addition to an aligned system, obviously continuing to search for and make the best use of resources is critical, and that's perfect with budget season and so on and so forth. But clearly, without adequate resources to do our job, and resources broadly stated, then it becomes incredibly difficult to continue the good work in the school system. We have one of our biggest areas of limit is actually, dollars are one limit, but probably the biggest limit we have is the limit of time. And so if we are spending time on something that doesn't have a real good return on investment, and return on investment in terms of achieving our goal, not just return on investment dollar-wise, our goal of student learning, then it's going to take away from something else we're doing. So whenever something new comes up, it's going to squeeze out other things, and we just have to be cognizant of that. So time is probably one of the scarcest resources we have in schools. Time for instruction, time for collaboration, time for making change at the school level, time for making change at the district level. We just have to be very, very careful about how we use that time, and that we don't get off on too many wild goose chases. While they may be nice things to do, aren't going to really have a direct link to improving what's happening in the classroom for kids. One of the big themes that we can, I think, really get, it cuts across a lot of these, is trying to use data more in our decision-making processes, student performance data specifically. That can inform school improvement planning, it can inform lesson planning, it can inform professional development. It's something that we really need to pay more attention to. So I think using student performance data and building systems that will allow that to be in the hands of teachers and principals and central office folks is critical. So that's sort of the whole outline. I'm usually a fan of fewer change efforts done well than lots of change efforts done haphazardly. And I think we've gotten a bit away from that, so I'm going to try to wrestle it in a bit to the extent that we can. So much of what we have to do gets mandated upon us. We can't turn away those things. You know, if the state comes in and does some sort of an audit and says you have to do X, Y, and Z, we can't say, well, sorry, it doesn't fit in this, sorry. Right? If we get a civil rights review and we have to do a whole bunch of work, I mean, you know, there's things we have to do. NEAS comes in and says you have to do this. And, you know, there's all kinds of outside forces. But on the things we can control, if we can sort of filter it through these lenses, then I think we've got the best chance possible of really moving toward the end, which is, you know, improving student achievement of our really fine program. So I'm going to stop there. And if people want to talk, they can, but otherwise, you know, it's all here in gory detail. So thank you for the opportunity to have some minutes with you, and I look forward to working towards actually implementing it.
Thank you, Dr. Tittle. Does any board member have any questions? Mrs. Albin?
I just want to thank Dr. Tittle. Sunday evening, when I was reading this, it was rather late on my computer, and given the ice, I didn't have transportation drive to my house so that people wouldn't get hurt, delivering it to me in hard copy. And on the computer, when you can't get to page, you know, the last page immediately, that's what I started the first page and I couldn't read this fast enough. Thank you. I just have to say thank you, and thank you to everyone who worked on it with you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mrs. Brand?
Yes, thank you. I too appreciate this in helping outlining, I think, what you have on your agenda and what you have in plan. With that same thing in mind, and I think in the same spirit that with what you're looking at, do you have a sense of the timing when you'll be coming back to be specific about where we are, I mean to date, right now, and then where you want to see us, say, in June or, you know, in 6 months, but so we can actually have like a status report and see what progress is happening?
Yeah, I would say, I consider this, by the way, it's a multiple-year change initiative. I mean, I see this as sort of, this is the end we're searching for, like, we want to get to an aligned system, so that's the vision. But it's not happening by September 1st, right? So what I really would like to do is the next step, and I really need to work with the administrative team and some other folks on, is sort of game planning, sort of in the big picture, what we can get done sort of on an annual basis moving toward that. So I would estimate that would be something that would come back to the board, I would guess, say September-ish for a discussion. Could even be something potentially if we have the August meeting, which might be a little less crowded in terms of real voting items. That might be a good time to have a discussion on it. But it's that'd be sort of the timeline for it. This, you know, this really lays out a concept. Exactly, I have in here, you know, 8 or 10 sort of menu items of how we might measure our progress. Well, some of those we don't, maybe inappropriate, and you know, because I brainstormed them. Some of them we don't have data on, so I can't really give you a progress report because we might not even go there. But we want to measure our progress based on how well kids are learning. That's the goal. So I've stated all of the measurement of progress in terms of student achievement, student learning, as opposed to, you know, measuring your progress on things adults have done. Because the end is student achievement. So I would say by the fall.
Any other board members? Mr. Carey?
Just briefly, I just wanted to say that I too, in looking at this over the weekend, was very excited about this plan. I've long felt that despite the fact that we describe our district as a good or very good education program, that we could be so much more. And I really feel that we can be one of the premier districts, if not just in Connecticut, but the country, with the right focus. And I believe this is an excellent first step towards that focus. I hope and would encourage that this board, our administration, our staff coalesce behind this vision. I think it's very important, and one of the things I heard in Dr. Title's presentation was filtering it through this lens. We really have to start looking at the decisions we make and every decision that's made, all the way down to whatever job you have in the district, through this lens. How are we going to improve instruction, improve achievement? So I'm really excited about this as a first step. I think this is a first step for something much bigger and better for our district, so thank you.
Mrs. Iacono?
I, too, just would like to thank Dr. Title. We receive our board packets, obviously, over the weekend, and I sat down to read mine. And this is a hard job to be on the Board of Education. It's not easy. We all have our moments. We all have our frustrations. This made me excited again, and it really got me engaged. And this is why I'm on the Board of Education. It really is. And I felt that again. And I thought, this is why we hired you, Dr. Title. And I'm thrilled to have a document like this. I'm thrilled to be working towards something rather than around something. So I am very pleased, and I commend you and everyone who was involved in giving you input so that you could put this together. And I look forward to helping move forward the district and with an eye on student achievement. And hopefully we will not get caught up in the minutia, because this is just so important. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Title. I feel the same way. I think all of us, I was going to use the word minutia, you stole it from me. I think we all have to, when we're discussing issues, the nitty-gritty, some of it ridiculous sometimes, the question in our mind has to be, how is what we're doing, how is that going to improve student achievement? Is it really going to improve student achievement? And we need to keep that in the back of our minds as board members. So thank you for this direction, and I look forward to hearing more about it in the coming months. So with that said, we are moving on, I believe, to item number 6, new business, presentation of high school media technology curriculum.
All right, this is a good segue, because if you're not teaching the right curriculum, it doesn't matter if you do a great job of it. So continuously updating the curriculum, keeping it up to date, making sure that we're teaching kids that are essential skills for the modern age is important. All the work we're doing in curriculum is vitally important. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rosato now, who will introduce our next part of the program.
Thank you, Dr. Title. We're definitely going to be moving away from minutia in this next presentation, and what's great about it is you're going to be hearing from us, but more importantly, you're going to be hearing from some students who are involved in this current curriculum that we're bringing to you. We're excited to bring to you 4 elective courses that are part of our library media program, and I want to put the emphasis on media because that's what these particular courses focus on. You probably know that both of our high schools are fully outfitted with video studios. And as such, the students there are afforded the opportunity to really do wonderful hands-on experiences, have wonderful hands-on experiences in video production. In fact, they practice and learn many of the skills that trained professionals out in the media field actually are doing on a daily basis. And many of our students who are engaged in these courses go on to study this work in their after they graduate from us. I would like to recognize our 2 teachers who are here. Regina Krieger, who is our library media specialist at Ludlow High. Would you stand up, Regina? And Gwen Gartsu from Fairfield Ward High School. They've worked very closely with Mr. Burt, who's our curriculum leader in this area, to put this together, and they teach these courses at both of our high schools.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to bring these 4 documents forward as part of, as Dr. Title said, a comprehensive program at both high schools. As you can see, we have broadcast journalism, documentary production, movie production, and video production. I also would like to thank the 2 teachers that did the bulk of the work on these curriculum documents. I think they did a fantastic job, and hopefully you had a chance to review them over the weekend. I'm very pleased with how they turned out. I would also like to recognize, as part of the process, we have a parents focus group that goes over these, and unfortunately, due to weather, our parents focus group turned to a parent focus group. And we just like to acknowledge Lenora Campbell, who showed up and braved the weather. So thank you very much for that. Just to kind of give you an overview, I don't want to do a lot of talking tonight. I want to hand this over to the students, but just to give you an overview of what these courses present and represent in our 2 high schools. Just give you a sense of the course goals. They range from fairly basic skills such as editing video and audio footage, creating a storyboard or a shot list, to more complex skills such as work cooperatively in groups as a production crew, analyze the effects of each genre on a viewer, practice sound journalism ethics, and discuss the ethical considerations of nonfiction filmmaking and viewing. It's also, these goals are focused through essential questions, and again, to give you a sense of some of the complexity of these courses, it's not just, editing film and learning how to use a camera. There's a lot more to these courses. And again, the students will give you some insight, but some of the essential questions from these documents include, is objectivity in documentary film making a myth? How does editing shape meaning? What is the journalist's responsibility to the public? And how do we tell compelling stories? So you can imagine the conversations around those questions that you would have with your classmates and with your teacher in that particular situation. In terms of assessments, again, run the gamut from basic of, camera angles and setting up tripods and setting up sound systems to, how do you pitch a story to your peers effectively? And how do you make your subject of a documentary at ease? How do you build a rapport with the people you interview? So there's a lot of things that are built into these courses. In terms of standards, we use, there's no state standards on this particular topic, so we use 21st Century Skills and the ISTE skill sets, which is the International Society for Technology and Education. So without much further ado from me, I do want to give one side note. You're going to notice that most of the film footage here is from Ludlow High School. Ms. Gartzu did provide some film footage, but unfortunately due to time constraints and the weather, we weren't able to integrate that. So my apologies to Ward. But I think you'll get a sense. They do work closely together over the unit production and from the video production stance. So here we go. Hopefully the sound is on. Nope, no sound. This worked in the trial run, just so you know. This is on. There's that there. Which is a longer process than it would seem. It's on. Now it's all the way up. Okay, hold your ears.
Focus on issues or stories that are just going on around school. Sometimes we take camera.
You hear it now?
In broadcast journalism, I learned how to put together a news package, which is a lot more complicated than it looks on TV. Because you have to find every single person, arrange an interview, and then actually go get an interview, which is a longer process than it would seem. I also learned how to work with camera, how to edit, I learned a lot about how different pieces of footage fit together to make a whole project. I learned to work with other people well. People you might not normally work well with. You have to sort of just put aside your differences and work with them.
And we would focus on, global issues, or we would focus on issues or stories that are just going on around the school. Sometimes we take cameras and we shoot football games or do pieces on kids that are making a difference. And we would take all of these pieces and put them in the Falcon Report. And that was just a really great group effort where everyone worked together.
It was a good community. Everybody on the news team sort of bonded,
And together we had a really fun, energetic show.
it was interesting to get to see how a journalist would go about doing what they do on a day-to-day basis. And it's interesting to, it gives you some idea whether or not you might be interested in that field.
I personally realized that I want to be a broadcast journalist. I want to do the news, hard-hitting news. I want to go out there and make history, write about amazing people, be there right when events are happening, write a story about them.
I think that students would benefit from taking this class because they'd come out of it with a much better understanding of movies, how they're created, the production behind it.
I feel like all in all, throughout the whole class, we definitely learned a lot about movies themselves. We learned we definitely take a different look. We have a different perspective about movies now. We can tell a lot more about what shots they're using, why they're using it.
It's a lot more work than I thought it'd be. It was all worth it though. It was all fun. We started off with the idea, the war movie. Then we sketched up some ideas on a storyboard. We wrote a script. That was a process in itself.
I learned how to use Final Cut Express, how to work the video camera, different video techniques and angles. I also learned, which is a big thing, how to work in a group with other people, because many times we'd have to film outside of school and you're in a group with people that you may not know, and that really helps you in the real world because in many jobs you're going to need to work in a group, and so this was good practice for that. This class is very educational, but it's a lot of fun, and you really learn real life skills.
I would say I learned a lot about documentaries for one thing. I didn't know very much about them before.
I learned a lot about the difference between a regular movie and a documentary, how it's two completely separate styles of making, editing, storyline. I also learned that a lot of the times the facts are not necessarily the same when you ask different people.
I also learned a lot about editing and how to set up the equipment for the camera. We chose a partner and we filmed something interesting about them. We kind of did a biopic about them. And then once we knew how to edit and knew how to work the camera, we got in groups and we did an actual documentary short.
The editing process of that is the most fun because you get to tell this person's story in the best way possible. And it really just helps educate everyone, and it really was a fun experience.
In video production, you get the whole package, basically. You learn all the different angles that you can use to your advantage and how it symbolizes something or how it impacts the film in general.
You learn how everything from history to technical skills, and you learn how videos come together, and it's on a whole nother level, whereas you could just learn writing, acting, and directing, or you could learn how even to the basic functions of the camera, everything comes together to make picture what it is. You also use different microphones, lavalier mics that clip onto you. You handheld microphones like news people use, boom mics like the stereotypical movie mics and whatnot, and you study how those are used. You rotate basically, so everyone's going to learn a different thing. So you're going to learn what it's like to run the camera, but then you know, the next day you'll do writing, or the next day you'll do the boom, and you have to remember what you learned about which mic would be best, where you want to place the mic, and then yeah, and it's just a big team effort because you realize that you're not really the only one involved, and you have to work with a bunch of people.
When I came to class every day knowing that I was going to go out in the field and film something, it was really a great feeling because I knew I would be getting my creative juices flowing, and that's something that it's something that you can't really do in everyday life, but when it comes to film and video and sharing ideas with the people in the class who have the same interests as you, there's no better feeling out there.
So as you can see, you know, as Dr. Title said, you know, we offer a comprehensive program, but you can tell that our students actually achieve what we ask them to do. So it's a very exciting thing. Just as a side note, you heard them talk a lot about collaboration, and I don't know if you've read Tony Wagner's book, The Global Achievement Gap, but he interviewed a number of folks in the corporate world and said, what was the most important skill set that you'd have for your employees? It's one, to ask good questions and know how to ask them, and two, is just be able to collaborate. So you can see through these courses, we're introducing our students to excellent skills that will take them far in the world. So I welcome any questions, but in the meantime, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Board members have any questions? Mrs. Zahn.
Thank you. Just a comment. Again, I'd like to thank everybody that helped put this together. Having two sons that went through Mrs. Krieger's program over at Ludlow, I can't begin to tell you how beneficial this has been, I mean, in their lives. And I'm sure it is for every other student. I know the other students that have worked in small groups with my sons, you know, I've heard back from them. They appreciate these programs. Like one of the students said on the tape, you know, get their creative juices flowing. So, you know, keep doing what you're doing. This is a great program. Thanks.
Any other members? Mrs. Brand?
Yeah, I just actually wanted to say thank you. We had the opportunity to hear this, a little bit of smattering of it in subcommittee, and actually having looked at the documents, the work that went into this was very clear, how thorough the documents were, how well thought out they were. It was very impressive, and I think it's a great program.
Thank you.
Mr. Carey.
What grades typically are we looking at that are participating in these classes?
It's open to all grades. It ranges. I don't know if you guys have taken any of the courses that put you on the hot seat. No, it's open to all grades.
In 9 to 12?
9 through 12.
And do we have any prerequisites in terms of core skills that students have to have before? I can't imagine a student not wanting to take something like this.
Typically, they take the video production first, because then you learn most of the basic skills that are necessary to go on to the other 3 courses, but it's not necessary. You can learn the other skills through the other courses as well.
Okay. I noticed in the 21st Century Outcomes document you had provided us, there was several areas that we're looking for student outcomes, at least according to this partnership. I was happy to see that the top was core skills and core subjects. And then we go into our set of interdisciplinary themes. This was actually page 2 and 3 of 9 of that document. Global awareness, financial economic business, civic literacy, health literacy, environmental literacy. Can you help us understand, this is kind of a bigger picture question, but how do we prioritize those? In other words, the core skills that we're trying to get taught in a format like this versus some of these other more rounding skills, I guess, or socially driven type skills.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Let me try to rephrase it then. We're working on a variety of things, from teamwork to basic core skills as part of this, as I read it, and maybe I didn't read it properly. But then, again, it looks like some of the other outcomes that you're trying to drive for with 21st century skills, as the examples you gave us were ancillary to this. Again, global awareness, financial, economic, business, entrepreneurial literacy, civic literacy. Is this something that you're trying to blend into the curriculum in all these classes?
Mm-hmm. Actually, what we've done through the Library Media Department, they've worked over the past 12 months, is creating a K through 12 skills matrix. It's based on this set as well as the ISTE standards as well as the AASL standards, information, communication, and technology. We have a mandate from the district essentially to embed these types of skills into our documents, and the way to approach that we thought was best was to identify those skills globally rather than just try to do piecemeal through individual documents, and then go through documents that are either coming forward or currently in existence and find ways in which we either are currently doing them, because many of them aren't necessarily technology skills, but they might be information skills, doing good research skills, which is something we would do in social studies, for instance. We currently do in 11th grade. Identify those pieces and then go through the matrix and identify the areas that we're not currently doing those things and try to find places to put those. But we have fairly good confidence as we go through the matrix, and we've had discussions. We had the entire Library Media Department from the entire district together over a course of 3 days, look at these different things, and they're very knowledgeable about all the core areas, and they said, yes, we do these things already. So we feel very confident that we can move forward into the 21st century framework in what we're doing, and then identify them and help teachers implement them, as Dr. Teitel said, with fidelity across the district and through all subjects.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing no one else, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
So then we'll have that on the next agenda for approval.
Right. Yep.
That's the game plan. So there's no action tonight.
Okay, moving on, we are on item 6B, approval of student participation in the RISAP 2011 Profile of Student Life Survey. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve student participation in the RISAP 2011 Profile of Student Life Survey. I have a motion, Mrs. Brand, seconded by Mrs. Zahn, and I'll turn this over to Dr. Teitel.
All right, this is something that happens every 3 years, and so I thought because some of you may not be as familiar with it as others, including me, and Mrs. Leonardi just give a brief overview of what the survey is. Your policy requires that the Board of Education approve surveys that are done, that involve students, unless they're a mandate from the state or something, so.
Good evening. The RISAP survey is a survey that's done every 3 years, as Dr. Teitel said, and we look at doing a middle school grade and one high school grade, somewhere between the grades 7 through 12. To assess, it's really about looking at developmental assets, the assets that help students, that strengthen students to make good choices about things like risky behavior, substance abuse, substance use, engaging in other social kinds of issues that could present dangerous opportunities for kids. And the data that comes back, I think what's powerful about this survey that we've done and we've participated in now as long as I can remember, is really that the data is used by a lot of different people. Currently, we have a town task force that has used RISAP data because it's across the entire area, not just Fairfield. Our health educators use this data, our counseling centers use this data, and it's perception data. It's not necessarily truth in terms of, we've done research into whether or not the students are answering accurately. It's really perception, and you're looking at 20% of the population. So we think it is a good use of time. It's a very short survey to take. It's easy to administer. It doesn't take a tremendous amount of instructional time, but it does lend itself data that we then turn around and use not only as a school district, but as a community to address some of these issues for our kids. So I would recommend that we do it, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have specifically about how we organize it if you have those questions.
Do board members have questions? Mrs. Zahn?
Not questions, but just comments. You know, I just want to remind the board, like Ms. Leonardi said, how many groups use the information that comes out of this survey. I remember, you know, Mr. Ebling with the gambling task force, and obviously the town and the parents got behind the alcohol problem, hence the breathalyzer policy. So I would just encourage board members to vote for this.
I don't see any board members raising their hand right now. So will this be, you said in the beginning, it's focused on one grade between 7th and 12th grade, so
It's
who's-
one grade at the middle level and then one grade at the high school
So
level.
who's getting the survey?
I would recommend we do it with 7th graders and 11th graders, because
Okay.
that would be consistent with past practice. But certainly, if we speak to RIASEP and they're looking for a different population this year, we would, you know, engage in that conversation with them.
Usually it's 7th grade and 11th grade.
Yeah, you're looking for kids who are kind of just entering into this time, and kids who are a little farther along to gain their perceptions about where we are as a community.
Mrs. Iacono?
How honest are the students with these answers, and how do you determine the accuracy of that?
Well, you know, it's hard to gauge whether or not in a 45-minute quick survey people are 100% honest, but or whether their perception is perfect.
Right.
But I do think when you're looking at 20% of a population, so if we're looking at the 7th graders across 3 middle schools, you're going to get a pretty good general sense. It's not perfect data, and no perception data is perfect data, but it gives you a sense of where you might want to focus some attention. Perception data is, in and of itself, imperfect,
Right.
because my perception may not be based in reality so much. You know, I may have a skewed view, and so you have to be careful with it, not to make sweeping judgments about it. You know, there was some data last time about parents and students' perceptions of their parents' beliefs about alcohol, right? If you remember, those of you who were around, and it was not so positive. You know, it really wasn't. You know, and but it gave us something to think about, and it gave us something to talk about, and it resulted in some change. We didn't go off and, you know, say all Fairfield parents are, you know, throwing wild parties and buying kegs. We said, we have an issue here because our kids perceive something that we may need to change our behavior about. And I think it started some conversations, which is what perception data is supposed to do.
Okay, thank you.
I recall that once this is done, does RISEP come back and gives
Yes.
us a report,
Yes.
basically?
RISEP will come back and report not only on Fairfield's data, but Fairfield in relation to surrounding towns and how Fairfield has fared comparatively from the last time we took the survey to now, to see whether there's been any impact in student perceptions based on some of the things we've implemented in the past 3 years.
Okay. Mr. Fatterby?
Do we know whether or not there's a cost associated with this?
There is
And what
not.
is that? There's no cost to this. And I assume this is going to improve student learning? Since we just discussed some of our...
Well, I think when you're looking at student learning, you look at whether or not there are things that detract from student learning as well. And some of these not having strong substance issues clearly could detract from student learning, but students' perceptions about their schools and community can also detract from that. So I think the data helps us look not just at academic data, which I think is critical in assessing our school district. If we only look at academic data, we may be missing some things. So this provides us a data point about how our kids feel about their schools, their communities, and some of their strength areas that we can help bolster as they move through our school district.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, who else other than RISAP and us have access to this combination of data?
Well, it's a public document.
I mean, the results are going to be published.
The results are public, so it's
So if-
FOIable,
All right.
if that's a word.
Oh, yeah, it's a word.
The word.
Mrs. Iacono?
Through the chair to our student reps, do you guys have anything you'd like to offer on this? Is this something that's positively received? Do you think it's well taken at the? Do kids take this seriously and answer it honestly? And I know you're only giving me your opinion, but
Allison?
I'm struggling with this. I'm sorry.
You're definitely going to get some kids who won't take it seriously. But, I mean, just speaking from the point, I'm also on the newspaper staff, and we do send out surveys, not of this, like, not with this much weight, but more, less serious stuff. You do get a lot of jokes back. Kids will just make up stuff, although this is, it seems a little bit more legitimate as it's I guess, is this a state survey, or?
It's a nationally written survey. It's
Okay.
a constructed survey.
There's really no way of telling it. It's really going to depend on what students are taking the survey.
Thanks.
Stephanie?
Sorry. I agree. I think some of them take it as a joke, but a lot of them take it serious and actually care.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Any public comment on this motion? Seeing none, are we ready to vote? All in favor? Opposed? No one, it's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 6C, discussion of roof warranty extension project, Roger Sherman Elementary School, North Stratfield Elementary School, Osborne Hill Elementary School, Riverfield Elementary School, and Holland Hill Elementary School. And I guess this is Dr. Title and probably some of our facilities people, is that correct?
Right, we've really got two items back-to-back that are facilities related. Now we're really going to get into the muck. But we want roofs that don't fall through. So just turn this over to Mr. Cullen and people on the subcommittee who have studied this issue, and that will probably bleed into the long-range facilities plan at the same time because it's all interconnected, is it not? Yes, okay. So I guess we'll have Mr. Cullen intro this.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This particular project came about through the John Mansville Roof Manufacturing Company that's working with, who is the rep on the 5 schools you see in front of you. The roofs that are on those schools are a Johns Manville roof. He is working with our roofing contractor and consultant who was awarded the preventive maintenance program for all the roofs, and brought to our attention that if we were to perform some repairs on these 5 school roofs to the tune of just under $1 million, that we could extend that warranty that's going to be running out soon by 5 years and probably more. So what they're telling us is if we'll do some infrared scanning, replace some of the wet insulation, make some of the repairs per the specs, the manufacturer will extend the warranty and make good on any future repairs and issues with those 5 roofs. The problem we're having, and why we're bringing it up to you tonight, is that decision needs to be made within 6 months of the warranties running out. So I believe Sherman and North Stratfield run out in August of 2011, and the others follow right after that. So we need to make a decision if this is a priority, and it's something we'd like to do to extend the roofs on these 5 schools, and possibly further with the good PM work we're doing, and do this work and bring it forward to the other town bodies.
And then just, and I know we'll have questions, but the concept was to extend the warranties because these roofs are all expiring at the same time. Is that correct, Mr. Cullen?
Roughly they are, from August of 2011, and one of them goes to about January 2012.
So when the roof,
in that year.
the roof warranty expires, how many years? Has it been 25 years for most of these roofs?
20, I believe.
Okay.
15 to 20, depending on the roof.
And then the idea is when a warranty expires, you have to start thinking about maybe putting a new roof on, right?
Correct.
And how much is the roof for Sherman, for example, just to get an idea?
I believe it's near the $2 million range
Okay.
for one school.
So, we discussed this in the facility subcommittee, and I'm probably botching this, and Mr. Carey and Mr. Luke can chime in here. The idea here is to extend these warranties and then plan over a period of time to replace these roofs, so we don't have to do it all at once and spend, that would be about, what, $6 million or so all at once? That's the concept?
Probably more than that, yep. And with the good PM work we're doing, and the manufacturer and the consultant have told us that we're doing great work with the PM we're doing on these roofs.
All right.
So if we continue that, the manufacturer's willing to do an extension on the warranties by doing some of the major infrared scanning and repairs.
Did I, Mr. Carey, Mr. Luce, summarize that adequately?
Yeah. When this first came before us, I kind of raised an eyebrow on it a little bit because, when you're walking out of the retail electronics store and they want to get you the warranty, you kind of got to wonder, am I getting value there? But if you look at the column right next to the total column, the 10 cents square foot, that's actually the only cost for the warranty. Now, we have to do work that, if I understand correctly, Mr. Cohen, correct me if I'm wrong, on each of these school roofs to improve them so that we can take advantage of that small dollar amount to extend these warranties up to 5 years. But this is the alternative that we're going to have to face eventually on these roofs one at a time unless we want to replace them all. I think what was presented to us was around 91. We had a whole bunch of roofs that were done at once.
Correct.
I don't know if the state was doing big roof reimbursement then, but having them all fall at the consecutive date is not helpful in terms of town capital management, which we were just discussing in the last meeting with the Board of Finance. So while this doesn't necessarily help us spread the pain out for these 5 roofs, they're all going to land roughly on a later date out of warranty again. It does in that, as opposed to paying $1 million or $2 million to resurface each of these roofs, we can push these out with repairs 5 or more years and then fit in ones that are more urgent in between, kind of actually spread the cost out, which I think would be more favorable than trying to do 5 or 6 roofs at the same time. So that's how I understood the discussion.
Right. I mean, just to put this into sort of the bigger context of the long-range facilities plan, in the long-range facilities plan draft that you have, that's the next item, there's a spreadsheet, and the cost of these roof warranties are in the spreadsheet. Right? If we decide, the board decides, we don't want to do these roof warranties, like you'd rather go for a replacement, then we would need to take that portion out of here and replace it with a roof replacement and put that in and, stagger that and fit that money in here. So just so you know how that fits into the plan, we didn't presuppose that you would want to do this, but that's how it's built. And so if we start looking at the long-range facilities plan and we start to say, oh my God, that number's uncomfortably high already, that if we don't do the warranty work the way it's described here, and we want to actually replace the roof, that's going to drive the number up on the long-range facilities plan higher. I think I have that right.
Yeah, Mr. Liu.
Yeah, I think you do have part of that right. The only thing that I'm a little confused about is, first of all, we have been, in the Facilities Committee, been talking about these roofs for a long time. And I, as I recall, I think you were saying that you thought this was a recommendation, something that was worth its while, and that it was serious, that it was something that we had to take advantage of, because if we didn't, we could possibly be dealing with leaking roofs and et cetera. Am I correct?
Correct.
I guess now the thing that kind of confuses me is why this didn't get on our capital improvement projects that we voted on. And what I guess the next part is how does that jive with the long-range facilities? Because I guess the only part I don't understand, Dr. Title, is they're not really the same. I mean, putting these in is really going to change, really going to change the number of the capital improvement.
Well, I mean, these numbers that are on the far right-hand column, under the roof warranty extension, okay, those are in the plan. Those are in the proposed plan.
In the long-range facilities plan.
Right.
But not in the capital plan that we've already voted on.
Correct. And we had a discussion about that in terms of, should we put all of this roof warranty extension work in? And the judgment there was, we didn't think the town was going to bond that. I mean, that was a repair, it sounded like repair work, and we weren't sure whether this qualified for that kind of arena. That was, it's so unclear as to what really qualified for that list. It didn't think to us that it qualified, but if we want to do this outside, if we want to go forward with this and try to take it out of this, and although this is all related to it, try to get it in there, we could, but it just sounded like it was not the kind of thing that would qualify for that list. But if the board thinks it will, then we can try it. Yeah. But see, that list that you had, that the board approved, that's in this long-range facilities plan, okay? Right? So
Part of it.
Yeah, we merged it. So that 1.5 or 1.6 million that you approved, that's in the 11-12 column in your long-range facilities plan that we've put here. Right? So that, it's a question of where does the town want to fund it from? It's like, I think Mr. Carey said at the last meeting, right, here's the need, we'll figure out how to pay for it. So it's in the plan. We didn't put it on the list, but it's entirely possible that the Board of Finance could put it as a short-term project. Nothing would keep them from doing it. So that's how it played out. So all of your roof warranty work is in the 11-12, is pretty much the 11-12 column, and the 1.5 or 6 of capital projects, that's also in your 11-12 column. I know it's confusing.
Mrs. Brand?
Relative to what actually Mr. Carey mentioned before, we have an organization or agency that's recommending for us to fulfill a warranty to do work. And what I know absolutely nothing about a roof, except for the fact that lately I've seen things hanging off of my roof, and they've been icicles. Right. But I think my point is that the people that are recommending this have a vested interest in us pursuing this. And the only thing I would ask, and I'm not quite sure if, through the chair to Dr. Title, or if it's for Mr. Cullen, is there some other reputable agency that does roofs that recommends this kind of practice? We all want to spend our money well, but I'm not sure if this is actually the best way to do it. And honestly, I don't know. But I also know I don't want to take one person or agency's recommendation, who is then also going to be getting paid to do the work.
Tom, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I could. One of the people that we've trusted and used in the 9 years I've been here has been Hoffman Architects. They're a firm that specializes in restoration work, and that's all they do. They research and find projects that are going bad, or buildings that are going bad, or that are leaking, or facades are falling down and need a lot of work. They've done an awful lot of work with us on our roof program, our PM program, our manuals, when the warranties are expiring, what work we need to do to them. And this was one of the things they did talk to us about in the future, was if we are taking care of our roofs accordingly, we can sometimes reach out to the manufacturers and look at a program where we can extend warranties by doing a few things that would fall under their jurisdiction, and that's the manufacturers. We wouldn't be able to reach out to multiple manufacturers. It has to be the manufacturer that has put the roof on these 5 schools, which happens to be the Johns Manville. But certainly when the project gets bid, it'll go out to all roofing contractors that will look at the project, and lowest bidder will get chosen through the town process. The other consultant we used was our roof PM contractor. We've been very happy with him. He's done a lot of work in the district to save us money. I've reported that before, and many of you probably heard me say, he has found a lot of manufacturing defects and issues that have been repaired to the tune of $60,000 one year, $40,000 another year that we didn't have to pay for. He was one that doesn't really have a vested interest in what we're doing with these, and he doesn't make any money based on it because it has to be bid. And so we have, and to answer your question, we have reached out to a couple of good consultants.
Actually, so was it actually the person that does, thank you, that does the preventative maintenance that also endorsed this?
Yes, it was
Okay.
both of them.
Thank you.
I mean, I think if I remember correctly, and Mr. Carey and Mr. Mottola, correct me if I'm wrong, we've been dealing with this since I think early last year, and I believe with Mr. Cullen's help, we've looked at it from many different options. Even there was a time where we were looking at the solar replacements on some, wasn't it, or was that that was another roof?
That was the
was the-
Ward roof, and that
yeah,
had
I'm sorry.
the solar voltaic cells combined with it. This actually came up, I believe, for the first time when we were at Holland Hill, which was a few months ago, 2-3 months ago.
But I think and again, if I'm speaking out of turn, I think we all sort of thought this was the best solution, and something we didn't want to necessarily wait on. But I guess my concern is I'm uncomfortable. I guess my feeling would be if we were to put this in, I'd say we'd need to take some other things out. That was just my first.
Sure.
So-
Mr. Carey,
so
and Mr.
I think-
Fatby.
I think that there's a couple things here. First is, what's the need? And we should always evaluate that. And really kind of what we're going to get into at some point is we can ignore the roofs, and at some point they're going to start failing, and based on the fact that they were all renovated at the same time, there is a risk that they all fail simultaneously. We can, or a number of them fail simultaneously. We can, which seems to be the preferred method following the TFC conversation on the Ward roof, we could try to patch repair, extend the life of the roof, which is what's being recommended here, and we get a benefit of additional warranty by doing that and spending those monies. Or we could fix a roof, have the team look at all 5 of them and say which one do you think is the worst, and go in to do the repair for one if one needs to actually be completely renovated at this point. So those are the options that I see. To Dr. Title's point, this is folded into a larger picture, and that's what we're going to talk about in a moment, and I've got some comments on that. But basically, that larger picture is First Selectman has given us a capital budget of approximately $19 million for large-scale capital projects, plus $2 million a year over 4 years for $27 million. So this has to fit in there somehow, and we have to decide if we want to make that a priority within the scope of what we are being told we can spend. So that's kind of, to Mr. Liu's point, I think, part of what the next discussion has to be.
I guess I have a question with respect to the extent of the warranty. There's different kinds of warranties. Some encompass a great deal, and some encompass not much. So I guess some warranties may only be material. Some warranties or claims may be denied for different reasons. What do you know about this warranty, and how extensive is this warranty? Does it include material and labor? Does it include a comprehensive problem with the roof, or are there limitations?
To get into the details of that, Sal Morbido is going to come up.
Grab a
He
chair,
was
Sal.
involved with them.
The extension of the warranty would be continuation of the existing manufacturer warranty, so a warranty claim typically is material and labor. Sometimes there might be a slightly different, depending on the actual repair that has to be made. There might be some tweak to that, and they would ask for participation, but it's typically material and labor that they are covering.
You know whether or not it would be prorated with respect to the life of the roof?
No, it's not prorated.
All right, and this was only an extension of the warranty. Obviously, after the end of the warranty period, you're still going to have to replace the roofs.
At
Or
some
not
point,
replace,
with
or
this work being done and the PM program that we're hopefully going to continue each year, we probably can extend it. The 5-year extension on these warranties was recommended. It could probably go even further, and probably will with good PM.
The work that would be done that would have to be done, the enhancements to the roof, add life to the roof, probably beyond the 5-year warranty period that they're going to give you. The 20-year warranty that you originally get for the roof, you hope to expect to get something more than that, 10%, 15%, 22, 23 years out of a 20-year roof. You're bringing this to 25 years, you're hoping to get another couple of years beyond that. What doing these warranty extensions gains is the ability to also do other roofs that are coming up that are not capable or not candidates for warranty extensions. We have other replacements that need to be done. Tomlinson, Dwight, so on. So this, let's say, instead of doing 2 roofs now, 2 roofs each year for the next few years, you take this warranty extension on now, this kicks the can down the road, so to speak.
And this
At
is
a
something we've
minimal
been
cost.
looking at. I mean, the Ward High School roof we looked at with the solar system, it wasn't just to gain the solar system for electrical and utilities in the future. It was a membrane product that was glued down to the new roof membrane. So if you got a 20-year new membrane on Fairfield Ward High School roof, the solar application added 5 years to that life expectancy, because it's glued down, they're mirrored material. So we're constantly looking at items we can do to lengthen the life of our roofs. We've got 16, 17 buildings to take care of in town, and, you know, it's a lot of work, there's a lot covering them.
do we have any known issues with any one of these 5 roofs as to why their life may be shorter than 5 years?
Just, I think, normal things that we see as soon as, you know, anytime we see rain, snow accumulation, when the custodians are watching, entering leaks detected in the My Roof Space program, so that as we do the PM, they can come out and look at them. So nothing major, nothing like Ward High School. We're having a lot of issues at Ward High School right now, but
In other words, you don't know with any one of these roofs right now whether or not you would expect to make a claim within 5 years?
no, we wouldn't know that.
No, and some of the warranty claims are, in the big picture, when Tom was explaining $60,000 worth of warranty work one year, $40,000 in another, that wasn't one $40,000 claim. That was many multiple claims, some of them just a few $100s. That because we have a proactive roof warranty program and we have our biannual inspection and cleanup, spruce up, and the rapid leak response, our contractor is documenting a lot of things, and when he's coming to a repair, is saying, you know what, Fairfield Board of Ed, this is not your problem. This is Firestone's problem. This is Manfield's problem. This is their problem, and turns into warranty work, and it shows up in cash, or something that we're not paying for and getting done.
Right. In the past approximately 20 years that these roofs have been on these buildings, has there been any warranty work performed in any one of these roofs?
Yes, there's been warranty repairs probably on every roof we had.
Can you tell me the extent or magnitude of that warranty service?
Like I said, it could be a small leak that's just a couple $100.
It could be expansion joint, repairs, pitch pockets around equipment and pipe penetrations.
Well, that's what it could be, but for these particular roofs, can you calculate the warranty service that was done on each of these roofs?
We can share that with you. if
In
you
a
want. I
dollar
mean, we've
amount
got
of warranty
reports
service.
from the past 2 years on all the school roofs.
And to your understanding right now, do you have an idea or a concept what range that number's in?
No.
I would, no, not for each particular building, I have to.
All right, so it wouldn't be a sufficiently large number that you'd remember it?
No, it wouldn't
All
be.
right.
I think it's Mrs. Albin and then Mrs. Iacona.
This is a discussion item this evening. Will it come back to us for our consideration for a board vote at some point? What would the next piece
Well, I
be?
think where you are is, it's part of the long-range facilities plan.
Mhm.
The goal would be, the earliest you can vote on that is the next board meeting, which is March 8th. People are hankering for this long-range facilities plan. They've been hankering for a while, for the update to the long-range facilities plan. So I think that you could make a decision if the board so wanted to at the next board meeting about not just this roof issue, but about the whole long-range plan. If you can't get agreement on it, then we'll just keep going until we do. But that would be when it would come back for approval. I think you would want to do it as part of the long-range facilities plan.
All right, thank you.
Mrs. Iacono?
I just have two questions. So your consultant is recommending that we do this. And in the long run, does it save us money?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the roofs? Yes, Mrs. Brand.
I don't have any reservations at this point. I think it's a good thing to do. I do have a concern, however, that we do have a timing issue with this one. It has to be done, and we have to address it very soon, otherwise we could lose out. And this, to me, would have meant that these items, these roofs, were a high priority. And because of that, I think they should have been in the original budget proposal for our capitals. I just think when we were looking at this, we were trying to do our best as a board to try and prioritize what we thought was important. And I think in retrospect, maybe we would have looked at it the same, but we don't know. And as the other town boards are looking at this and looking at our proposals, our first budget request, I think, carries more weight than an add-on, or at least doesn't demonstrate that we're prioritizing. And had we had the opportunity, I would have preferred to see it sooner.
Let me ask you a question. If we say we want to extend these warranties, when do we have to pay for it? That's the question. I mean, we have to put them on notice that we want to do it in March. When do they expect the check? When the actual original warranty expires, which would be in August?
As you can tell from the spreadsheet, there's several things that you would have to do. The actual payment for the warranty, which is probably the smallest number on that sheet, would come at the acceptance by the manufacturer of the work in place by the contractor that was selected by a public bid. It's when the work is done, when it's complete.
When the work is done, all right.
So realistically, this is going to move forward, whichever budget it was in, because what you approved in the capital project is in this long-range plan also. It's all going to move forward sort of simultaneously, and it all depends on how fast it moves through the other town bodies. We can't really notify manufacturers about this until we get some assurance from the other town bodies that they're going to go along with that. And at that point, if the conversation is, yeah, we really like this, take some other things out of your 11-12 plan to make room for it, then we can do that. But we can't give them notice. We'll have to talk to them about, can you work with us a little bit? We've got a budget process to go through that's not going to be done until May. I think they can work with us on that.
Okay, any other questions, comments on the roof? Yes, Mr. Liu.
So then I think possibly tonight, we need to make sure this gets on our next agenda so that we can we make sure that that gets done tonight, that it will be on the agenda?
Sure.
Thank you.
We'd like to actually get the whole long-range facilities plan on the next agenda. I mean, the whole package, I think, Mr. Liu, was the game plan, including that.
Okay.
So, should we?
Yeah, let's move on.
To the next thing. Let me just give you an overview on this facilities plan documents that you have in front of you, because there's two different things. Facilities committee's been working very hard at this. First, this is a different model. This is a different format from what you've seen before, right? Kind of like the budget, trying to make it as simple as possible and as clear as possible. So we've eliminated the distinction on here between what is short-term bonding and what is long-term. It's all in one column. And the first page is a summary, and this lines up with the 4 years the 4-year window that the first selectman put out in August. He put forward a plan with a proposed allocation for the Board of Ed that spanned this exact time frame. So when the board looks at this, you can see how this compares to what the first selectman had suggested as the guideline. Now, no one's acted on that suggestion, but this is the time frame.
This is, just for the public's benefit, enclosure number 5.
Right.
Okay?
And 6.
And 6.
So the 10-11, sorry, the 11-12 to 14-15 window is what we have here. And so there's a summary sheet which shows by school, by year, the dollars that we're estimating. And then each succeeding page gives an overview of what the project is, and where you see an asterisk, they're projects that we think may qualify for the short-term bonding, but again, we aren't 100% sure of that because we're not quite sure what qualifies and what doesn't there. So we basically put the whole thing together so you have this overview by school, by project. Now, and then there's a gross amount by year, and then there's a total. And then there's an estimate on what the state reimbursement is, and then there's a net. Now, the major projects that are in here were estimated before the MGT capacity study was done. They were basically to do core upgrades, and where we were going to be replacing portable classrooms, we had budgeted out, priced out annex buildings, not full-fledged additions. The MGT report came out and identified the core issues, went back to the facilities committee, we were looking at it, and basically the exercise that we were asked to go through was, what would it cost to remedy all the deficiencies identified in the MGT space capacity study and do a Stratfield type addition to these schools, not an annex, a real live addition. Right? So if the MGT study said this school is 6.5 classrooms short because we've got 6.5 classrooms worth of kids in inappropriate spaces, what would that cost? And that's the second sheet you have, enclosure 6. And that includes all the schools, not just the ones that are on the long-range facilities plan. All of the estimates to remedy the space deficiencies are significantly more expensive than what's on this enclosure 5. Because enclosure 5 was smaller in scope and was annex buildings as opposed to add-on, solid additions. If, at the way it stands right now, under this proposal, the gross total for the 4 years is $49 million and change. The first, and that includes the short-term plus the long-term. So in the first selectman's plan that he put forward, that total was $27 million. So without remedying the MGT deficiencies, we're already $22 million over. If we want to do it, I hate to say this, really the right way and remedy all the deficiencies in one fell swoop, then what you have to do is go substitute the number on enclosure 6 for the number that's on enclosure 5, and you'll see they're all higher. All right, so let's just take an example of the first one that's on the box. There's Riverfield. Riverfield is listed as approximately $6.2 million project on the spreadsheet. To remedy the Riverfield issues and make it a full-fledged addition would be an $8.5 million project, and we did not do construction cost inflation on these, but that's 2011 dollars, so that's a pretty good number right now. So if we wanted to do the full-blown, let's remedy all the issues at Riverfield, we're estimating, and Mr. Cullen can go through the detail on how he did this, at 8.5 million. So that's a difference of 2.3 million, roughly. So you can go through each project and see the differences. So this is a matter of choice, strategy, choice, and knowing that you're all, that we're way over whatever is out there as a proposed number anyways. But there was some feeling of, we should put out what our real needs are. If we really want to remedy this problem, this is what it's going to cost. Other people are going to say we can't afford it, and we have to backtrack, and we may end up at less than that number. So that's why you have the two documents. I guess that's the best way to explain it. The only thing I will say on the enclosure 6 is that there's a line just above the total called reach-in costs, and that is that when you go and actually add onto a building, physically add into a building like a Stratfield, you have other costs associated with that building, code work and so forth, that you don't necessarily have if you do an annex. So that's what that represents. It's all good stuff. It's all stuff you'd want to do, but it does drive the cost up when you do that. So I guess that's sort of the big picture here, and we think the feeling on the committee was it thrashed about enough with it, and we want to move this something forward, and this is our best estimate on what it will be. The only thing I would say is that if we do decide to go with the numbers on enclosure 6, that any project that's 12, 13, or later needs to be adjusted for construction cost inflation, because they are not in here. Okay, I'll stop on that.
I'm going to go to Mr. Carey first, then Mrs. Iacono. Mr. Carey was the chairman of the subcommittee, so go ahead, Mr. Carey.
So, and thank you, Dr. Titles. That's an apt description of what we asked you to do, and that was the one part I didn't have here in what I wanted to discuss, so it's very helpful. I kind of want to frame what we've been doing in a couple of areas. One is kind of the macro or the 100,000-foot level. We've been collecting information over the past several months. Part of what I discussed earlier is that one of those pieces of information is this document we all received from MGT, enrollment figures, capacity study. The committee believes that the enrollment portion of this requires further discussion by the full board. That's something we're going to take on, I think, in a future meeting. However, the capacity portion of the study speaks for itself, and the story is very unsettling. At this moment, we are 900 seats short of delivering the program at the elementary school level. We're basically 3,938 is what we have to deliver the program at elementary level, and we're, as of October 1st this year, at 4,850 students, including pre-K. So part of what we've discussed is that we believe at the subcommittee level that this is a problem that's going to require input from all the town bodies. And the discussion that we've had focused on engaging those bodies and also gathering more information. This would kind of fall in the resources bucket from the vision we heard from the superintendent earlier this evening. It's our job to build the case for why these facility resources are needed. Specifically, we need to educate the community on the depth of this problem, determine its willingness to act. Otherwise, our efforts in this area are theoretical, and it's really not a productive use of our staff's time. So one thing that we could do as a body, and again, I'm staying at the macro in terms of collecting information, is engage a firm to evaluate all of our facilities to determine if we can get more bang for our buck out of these existing buildings. This also lends itself to the overcrowding that we're going to have at the high school level as well. Can they be reconfigured in a way that can create more operational capacity, program capacity, across the system? These architects could create a master facilities plan for our district that would be very comprehensive and accurate in terms of cost estimates. We could utilize the expertise available on the Town Facilities Commission and ask them to be partners in this process, and up front, have them assist us in direction to the architects. However, all this is pointless if there's no desire by town officials to act on any recommendations that would result from this type of study. And that's really the bottom line. We really have to, I think, get a sense for this. We are miles apart in terms of what we've been told the town can afford and what the dollar amounts are here on the need. If there is a willingness by the town to move forward, then collecting more definitive information seems like a logical next step. Once we have a clear idea of the best ways to address the problem, we can engage the community to create a phased plan that includes redrawing boundaries, building reconfiguration, maintenance, code and core updates as necessary. Before us, we have these two plans, and these are the priorities from our district team. A great deal of time and effort has gone into the recommendations. In considering this request, we put forth some questions that were posed to the subcommittee that I want to share with the rest of the board, because I think this is, again, part of our consideration this evening. First and foremost, the first selectman, as Dr. Tedels indicated, allocated $19 million plus a maximum of $2 million a year in small project funds for a total of $27 million to the district for the next 4 years in its capital plan. As you can see, we're somewhere between $38 million after reimbursement and significantly more to fix these problems. So it's clear the total excess will far exceed our allocation. It also appears that even with belt tightening, these needs will still exceed this amount. So how should we be approaching this? This is one question I think that we really need to seriously discuss, because I think that we have to come out of whatever we decide with the recognition that if the amount is the amount, what are our priorities? Other things in terms of when you get down to the nitty-gritty, and the nitty-gritty in terms of the big-ticket items on this is Riverfield, Holland Hill, and Mill Hill in the upcoming years. There were specific things that we could do with these buildings, but what we are considering is updates at buildings that are enrolled beyond their building capacities, i.e. that they have portables, and the portables have a certain life. So the options that the board has to address this simply are, we can recommend code and safety updates, limit core facility updates, and replace the portables with portables. That's an option. I'm not recommending it. Another option would be recommend code and safety updates, limited core facility updates, and replace the portables with a pod or annex structure. And the third option could be to recommend code and safety updates, replace portables with a permanent structure, and complement that with comprehensive facility updates. And that's really what it comes down to. How are we going to address this? What are we going to ask for? And there's a cost to each one of these things. The other thing is, is the replacement of portables necessary? Well, I think yes, after we've learned about this deficiency at this point. And is the plan that we're evaluating going to create enough seats to handle our capacity deficiencies? Which is why we've gotten this secondary report that looks at the core spaces. I think it's a fair way to look at it. It kind of puts us in between an annex, quite honestly, and a McKinley or a Burr. It's not going to be a 70,000 square foot building, but it's going to be a building, if we look at number 3 that I just described, that will meet the needs of the program, which I think is essential. If we're going to ask for something, we should ask for something that's going to work. That's basically it. A lot of discussion has surrounded whether or not the requests at the elementary level would meet the needs of the district. In other words, what we're asking for is needed. Dr. Tuttle's done a good job of describing the differences here in terms of what the rationale was, but obviously the more we get done towards the program, the bigger the dollar amounts go, and the greater the risk that what we ask for limits how many things we can fix. And that's a serious and weighty thing to discuss. So that's kind of just the roll-up in terms of what the discussion's been. The thought, again, that was bandied around the committee was this is an issue that really will require input from all other town bodies. And if we were to go forward with creating a master facilities plan with educational architects, we really felt that it would be important to understand what the other town bodies' feeling would be in terms of how they would respond to that once it was there. This is something that will cost probably upwards of $150,000 to do. And if we do it so it just ends up on the shelf, then it's a waste of $150,000. And that's really the bottom line. So that's kind of the 100,000 foot. I have my own thoughts on these issues. I'd be happy to share a little later in the discussion, but that kind of frames it and puts out some questions that we have been asking and wanted to make sure the other board members had a chance to think about as we had this discussion.
I think it's Mrs. Iacono, then Mrs. Alpin.
Okay, so just so I understand this correctly, you guys looked at the long-range facilities plan that we have right now, and this is what you identified as the priorities that you wanted to move forward to the board to discuss. Dr. Tite, I don't know who wants to answer that question.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. First of all, I think we should absolutely be using enclosure number 6. Number 5, in my opinion, having sat on the Special Projects Standing Building Committee and been reprimanded by a member of the Board of Selectmen, and now this evening, a member of the Board of Finance for not having our numbers come in correctly, I think it's pointless to use number 5. Because you hire an architect, they come in, they look at an ed spec, they go through and they fix your deficiencies, and the numbers absolutely come out higher. So to use number 5, it's just going to do everybody a disservice. So in my opinion, we need to be working with number 6, which really stinks because the numbers are obviously significantly higher. And again, just now having come out of the Sherman project, there's just no way that Riverfield's $6.2 million to do what we want to do. It was 4.4 to ask to do what we wanted to do at Sherman, and that was virtually nothing. So it's not $6.2 million. I wish it was, but it's not. I like I said, I'm repeating myself, but I just did this exercise. And it's nobody's fault. I mean, it just is what it is. They go in, they look, they figure it out, and that's the way it comes back. I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's 8. I think it's probably 10 or 12. Just knowing what I know about going through these exercises on building committees. So we're off. We're way off. And I think we do need to have, to Mr. Carey's point, a bigger discussion with the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the RTM about what we're going to spend and how we're going to spend it and how we're going to get our numbers and get a realistic picture of how we move forward. Maybe it's that we don't put a number on something, and we say this is what we need done here. I don't know if that's realistic, but we're getting ourselves in trouble. And I just don't want to see that continue to happen. So we need to do this smarter. And my other thing is, what happens to a school like Sherman? We had a list that what that school needed was $4.4 million worth of work. With the FEMA cap there, we were obviously restricted, and there's things that just aren't going to happen for that school. But there are other things that can happen for that school, that need to happen for that school. For example, the traffic safety issues outside the building. Where is that in this long-range plan? Like, why does that fall off the list?
It's not in the first 4 years.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
we've done some.
Why do we decide that we're not going to finish Sherman? Because that's the big discussion. Are we coming
Yep.
back? Are we ever talking about Sherman again? We can't do the fire suppression. We can't do some of the other life safety things, but we can do the traffic circle. We can do the lockers. But why have you guys now decided that in the next 4 years it's just not a priority?
Because I think other schools have needs, and Sherman had its turn, and we'll get back to it. I think that's the goal eventually. It's just, as you well know, it's balancing needs of other schools also. It's a choice, and maybe it's not that we're ignoring Sherman, it's just that there are other needs at other schools, and Sherman got its bit. It's not totally done, we understand that, but there's other needs in other schools. I think that's how we looked at it, but Dr. Title or...
I think part of what happened was when we put this together, it's only become apparent in the last couple of weeks or so that Sherman wasn't going to, get everything it wanted to. I mean, there's still ad alternates in there. I mean, we still don't know the full scope of the deficit at Sherman, and we know we can't go back to the pot there for a while anyways because of the FEMA rules. So I think that became, that's not going to happen in these 4 years. We could very easily end up in another out year. And stuff has to get squeezed. It's like putting your operating budget together. You're already $1 zillion over anyways. So I think those are some of the reasons for it. We do have the roof there for the Sherman project.
I'm looking it up now to see what year it is.
Yeah. So I think that was also part of it. It's like other schools came up on the rotation. We thought this project was going to take care of what we needed to do at Sherman. And
Right.
It didn't.
That's okay. I just know that that's going to come up in the course of conversation. I just wanted to know.
2018 is Sherman's roof.
2018, there it goes.
And then other things like lockers, we might be able to do, even in a town non-recurring type account, or even in Board of Ed.
Right.
So we have to
Up in
see
there.
what's not going to get done.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, those are my thoughts. I mean, this is obviously going to be so difficult moving forward. I'm open to hearing other people's, thoughts and ideas, too, about getting more precise numbers, or how we present those numbers. This is hard, and it's not fun to go before the Board of Selectmen and get reprimanded, and it's not fun to go before the Board of Finance, get reprimanded, and I'm quite certain we'll probably go through, and I'll stand and get reprimanded by the RTM. Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey's smiling at me. So, we need to think about that. And I made a commitment to those boards that I would bring that up at the table, so.
We're used to getting yelled at, so it's just the way it is. Mrs. Alvin, you're next. And then Mrs. Brown, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, sir.
Earlier this evening, I was very encouraged and very excited when we were on another agenda item that was talking about student learning. And when I look at this agenda item before us, I cannot tell you, but the air went out of that balloon. And I say that to my fellow board members. I say that to everybody in this room. For 12 years nearly, I have looked at facilities plans. And my concern is if we adopt one next month and we bring it to the town, we will be criticized for wanting Taj Mahals. We're talking about classroom space, but we will be criticized for wanting Taj Mahals. And why do we need all of this? Mr. Carey had many very good points. I would be very interested in having an architectural study of our buildings, but it would be a waste of time and money if nobody from the town will hear that information and know that we're doing our best here to provide not only instruction, but the tools. And a tool is a classroom and a proper core space that our students need in order to be able to properly learn, as well as having good teachers. I've been doing it for nearly 12 years. I cannot tell you how discouraged I am, because with all due respect to the first selectman, he's doing his job with what he needs to do. I don't know what his numbers are based on. $19 million, and we have a figure before us that's probably low if we were to do this work because it doesn't adjust for inflation, almost $55 million. I think, again, and I will say, if we approve anything, I think we're wasting our time because we have to engage the people who hold the checkbook. And we really need to bring them into this discussion at this stage. They need to know what we're struggling with. Because until the people who serve on those boards know what we're struggling with, and I do see someone's head shaking back there, and I would like those people to go to their boards and say, you need to know what's going on at the Board of Education, what they're struggling with. I beg of you to do that, please. This is a town-wide discussion. We can't make the decision here because we don't have the checkbook. So I would ask this board, and I would ask the chairman and the superintendent, and I hope the board would join in with me, we need to speak to those bodies, and we need to have them here for this discussion before we approve anything. Because anything we approve will have holes shot through it on day one.
Mrs. Brand?
A couple of things. What I've seen with building committees is they do first hire an estimator. So they actually know what they need to do when they're asking based on the needs of the project. And there are people, there was one in particular I remember recently that was brought forward for the committee's consideration for a hire that basically was recommended in, quote, the best in the business. And then when they walk in, they pretty much tell you exactly what it's going to cost. You tell them what you want to do, they'll tell you what it's going to cost. It might be prudent for the district to pursue that avenue to get a very, perhaps more reliable and more independent and professional assessment of the costs of what we need to do with our buildings. The other thing, when we're backing in, because honestly, we're backing in, we've been chasing buildings for as long as I can remember because we've had either deferred maintenance so that we had facility issues because of a condition, or because we had a shortage of school seats, so we were chasing it. In fact, the bubble and the Fairfield Woods project is a perfect example of that. I think we just sort of squeaked through and got slightly ahead of a bubble. But I think what dictates a lot of what we've done with our facilities are the condition of the facilities and enrollment. Second to that, unfortunately, has been educational space. Because what we're looking at with one document is through the lens of just what's educationally appropriate. And unfortunately, we flunked. We didn't come ahead there at all. I think because, quite frankly, the district has settled just for making sure we had a seat for a child. So there are a couple of things. Moving forward, I think we want to make sure that, in terms of priorities, that we've looked at the condition of the buildings, whether it's portables or not. That is going to dictate our timetable. The next thing I think we're going to be looking at is enrollment. Again, whether we're going to be looking at elementaries first or high school space first, what is going to be next on our list? And then when we figure those two things out, the next thing is then, okay, can we get someone to give us an accurate assessment of what these things will cost? Now, this, to me, is educational space. This is what we're supposed to have been doing. In fact, it doesn't even have cafeterias on it. And we know we're struggling to feed the students. It's been an issue in every single course site that we've returned to. The kids couldn't get to eat lunch. They didn't have time. It's still an issue that I think when we have to prioritize it, though, so I think condition, enrollment, and education, and then it would be my recommendation that we pursue what it would cost to hiring or have a consultant who is a professional estimator take a look. And that might be a quick way to get us a little more accurate numbers. So moving forward, when we're talking with the town bodies, which I completely endorse, I think it's the most reasonable, sensible thing to do so that all of us are on the same page, not just from the school district, but the town, about what the expectations and the needs are, and then what we can afford. But I think that would actually be very helpful to approach it that way.
Go ahead, Mr. Liu.
Thank you. We have been talking about this in the subcommittee, about presenting to the town. I said it in the last meeting, and, well, actually, I think it was you, Mrs. Brand, who said it several months before, that we need to get the town educated on where we are at. I think in the last subcommittee, we all sort of agreed upon this, and I think what Mr. Carey was saying about, well, do we want to hire architects to give us numbers, just to find out later that we're not going to get a go-ahead. I can see it both ways. I guess the flip side of it is, do we really think, and I'm not making the other town bodies the bad guys, but I mean, are we going to get a real actual promise? I think basically they're waiting for us to show them the homework that we've done to make a case, and in part of that is educating them. So the other thing that I think we might do is we might think hard and strong about that we really do need to get accurate numbers, meaning that we need to hire an architect agency. I think the other thing that we have to do is take the information that we've just gotten after we've sort of nailed down, are these projections correct, but incorporate them, with real estimates. Basically, it's putting all of our ducks in a row so we can make a very educated presentation to the town about what we are up against and where we need to go forward, and hopefully that they will sort of at least see what we're trying to do. I don't know if just going to them saying we're in a bind is really going to necessarily get all the support that we're actually looking for. But I do think education of the town is going to be really important here. And I would say that, you know, right in this moment, right now, looking at the long-range plan that I've looked at the subcommittee, you know, part of me would say we should, you know, I don't think, as much as Riverfield, I want to get Riverfield done, I don't want to do any of these things until we know the grand scheme of it all. So maybe it's just about maintenance this year. And maybe it's just, and then taking this rest of this year with projections, with the audit, you know, maybe looking into the architects in order to be able to come up with a real plan.
Mrs. Iacono?
You might be onto something, only because where are you going to get the money to pay for an estimator or an architect? Because we just passed our budget. The first selectman just recommended we cut our budget. I don't know where we're going to get, where do we get the money to do that? What's the impact of oh, God, I hate to even say this, of putting this all off for yet another year? What happens? Some of this stuff has to move forward, though. I mean, you know you need to do this stuff at the Early Childhood Center. That's not going to change anything. You know you need to do roof work. I guess what you're really looking at is school space stuff, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think there's a lot of good points made by everybody. We're going to have to move on in a minute, and I know Mr. Carey has his hand up, but the issue is, what do we want to move forward for 2011, 2012? That's the issue. Is it all this, part of it? It's going to be some of it, obviously. And then thereafter, is it the concept that some of us have been discussing, engage the other town bodies, hire an architect or an estimator, whatever you want to call it, to look at the rest of the facilities. But we don't want to do that if it's, as Mr. Carey has said, it's going to end up in a closet. That's going to be a waste of money. So I think our focus should be, what do we want to do for next year, 2011, 2012? And then what's our longer-range plan thereafter? Because we do want to do some things for next year. Mr. Carey?
Really going down tonight, I think. So to answer Ms. Iacono's question, and I think Mr. Liu alluded to this, I'm viewing this as kind of two things. We did the 1 year in punt last year, okay? And part of what I think we need to gauge the town for is a definitive process on how we're going to move these capital projects through. It's like a moving target. We make a request on June 21st of 2010 to get Sherman done for that summer, last summer. We don't get a response for 5 or 6 months. We go around and around the merry-go-round, get the TFC involved, don't get the TFC involved. It's always a different process. So I think that what we need to do is have a definitive process and understand what that is as part of this discussion with the town. This here, and I don't want to diminish the work that our team has done, because there's been not tens but hundreds of hours of work in terms of what we've demanded of Mr. Cullen and his team. I view this as a needs list more than what I'm describing can be created, which is a master facilities plan. And that's not to diminish work. This is a lot of background that was provided to us in a lot of detail and a lot of hard work to figure these numbers out. And I know they're a moving target, and I know by the 24 months from now, when Riverfield actually gets up on a docket, the number is not going to be the same. You're right. Things change. Our ed specs will drive it. But I think that there's a double-edged sword here that we face. I'm fairly comfortable the administration wants us to pass this because we keep on getting this question. I would look at this as, do we want to continue to move forward with 11-12, engage the discussion, the rest of the town and build a plan that will give us more information that we need, that the town needs. Right now, we have a pretty good idea where enrollment's going. We know about what the capacity is of the buildings definitively. The next thing we need to know is, in my opinion, how we can get the most bang for our buck out of these buildings in terms of operational capacity. And that's going to take a lot more work than we can put on our own staff. They have day jobs besides just doing long-term facilities plans for the Board of Ed. So the reality is that what we have before us is, one of the things that's our responsibility as a board is to identify the need. And getting into my opinion on this, yes, I'm definitely for moving towards enclosure 6. I asked for enclosure 6 and created all the extra work for the team, which I appreciate you doing. I think that it's our job to make sure that the requests that are coming from the administration have merit, but we need to identify what is needed. And if what is needed is $50 or $60 million worth of work so that we can deliver the program, I don't think we should be hiding that from the other town bodies. Now, how we can do this the most effectively and get the most bang for the program, I think we're going to need to bring in professionals for that. But again, if there's not a process, we're not going to, and we don't understand what the process is, we're not going to make a lot of progress. My fear is if we hold off on this, it's going to move Riverfield into a danger zone. And what I mean by that is that we have portables that are circa 2000, 2001, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cullen. They typically have a shelf life of 10 to 12 years. These types of projects for this scale usually take, in this town, 3 to 5 years to get going, but, in an emergency, maybe a couple. The portables are going to dissolve underneath us, and we're going to have kids sitting there that need space at that building. The question you have to ask yourself about Riverfield is, based on where it's located and the problems that, we've identified in terms of capacity deficiency, do we think there's ever going to be a lack of kids to go into that school? So if you want to look at it as a one-year plan, that's fine. I'm comfortable putting forth a 5-year list with the enclosure 6 numbers on the buildings, with the understanding that we move forward to try to convince the town to collaborate with us to collect more information, to build a master's facilities plan. Once we know the best way or ways that we could use the facilities that we have, the space that we have in this town, if we have to expand, whatever it may be, I think that at that point, we would be in a position to go back to the community and look at how we can build a phased plan that includes redrawing boundary lines if that's necessary, and being able to fit everyone in for the next decade, which is the goal of one of these. If the answer is going to be, sorry, you got $15 million and you just got to scrape for the next 4 years and we see what the economy looks like, going through this theoretical exercise over and over again just takes away staff time from other things that could help us drive achievement. So I think that the town will be receptive to having a discussion on this, and I think that we have the resources in the community through the TFC and through our team to be able to get something like this done. But we really need to understand what the process is going to be and create those parameters before we take that next step, is how I feel. So I would support approving this with the understanding that the next step would be to, look into 11-12, but go to the town bodies and build a master facilities plan. And ideally, I'd love to see us be able to put a 4-year plan on the table that all the town bodies could vote on. We have to look into the charter on that, I know that. But what I repeatedly hear is everything's in a silo. I heard it again tonight. I hear it from the RTM. I know they're over here. Every project's in a silo. Well, why don't we give them 4 years worth of projects? Let's all agree on what we're going to spend. Let's give everybody 4 years worth of projects. We'll vote on it all at once. And then we don't have to waste everyone's time for every single $30,000 estimate, every $250,000 architect. And we can actually bid the whole thing out in one massive group and get a better deal for the town. And those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, so why don't we move on? This will be on the agenda at our next meeting in March. There's a lot to think about.
Well, let me see if I understand what the direction is here.
Sorry, Mr. Fattabine has something.
Oh, okay.
Real
I gotta make
quickly,
sure I know what to do.
What I'd like to see in addition to this is some effort, although I know it's difficult, to prioritize these projects as well. Because it's quite clear that it appears as if it's unlikely that we're going to get funding for all of these projects easily. So I think it would be beneficial to try and give some rank order or prioritization to some of these projects in the event we have to make some decisions as to which ones can move forward and which ones can't. So I'd like to...
I mean, I think that's kind of been done in Enclosure 5.
Well, there's a total sum for, say, 2011, 2012. There's a net total after reimbursement of $9 million. The town, through the first selectman, has given an indication as to where the town wants to go, which is guidance, in my opinion, as to what might or might not happen. Knowing that, I think it's prudent to try and at least plan with the expectation that you might or might not get more than that. So with that understanding, I understand all these are considered high priorities. But I think it would be beneficial to rank the really essential ones to the ones that may be able to wait a year, to the ones that can't wait at all, or some indication as to what the condition is and ramifications of necessarily delaying that. Because quite honestly, we can put anything forward. If it's not approved by all the town bodies, we're still in the same position, and we haven't done our job in planning effectively and efficiently to try and do the best we can with whatever the resources the town ultimately gives us. So I don't think we should spin our wheels and hoping and praying that we're going to get all the funding we want when it's becoming evident we may not. So as part of our prudent planning, I'd like to have some additional information so we can make the difficult decisions as to where we're going to go.
So I guess, if I understand you correctly, if we look at Mr. Fladel's number of about $27 million over a 4-year period, right? And I understand what you're saying, and our subcommittee has struggled with that to a certain extent, too. How do we want to spend that $27 million? What are our priorities? What is essential with that figure in mind? I think that's always going to be in the back of our minds, and maybe it needs to be up front. But my concern about doing that, which I still think we have to do, is I think the thought of the subcommittee was we need to present a plan that addresses all of our needs with an understanding in the back of our minds that we may not get that, but we don't know that yet. And it's kind of hard to plan because we don't know what the figure's going to be. I mean, it's one person, albeit he's the first selectman who's come up with that $27 million figure, but he doesn't decide that on his own. And I'm struggling with this, Paul. I think we all are. But, so we have to move on, but I'm going to go around one more time, and then we're going to move on. Mr. Carey, go ahead.
Mr. Fadbean has a legitimate concern, and it might be worth further discussion by the board, but I mean, technically, the way this works in Enclosure 5 is that once you get to $27 million, we're done. Now, you know, that being said, I do agree with Mr. Mottola that I think it's our job to identify the need for the district. But if the board would want to look at how this has been prioritized by the district and the subcommittee and change that in some way, I'm certainly open to that discussion.
Mrs. Iacono?
I think what we need for the next meeting, and I was hoping that we would be able to vote on it, but maybe we won't. Maybe we'll have to do it at the second meeting in March. But I think what we need to do is get a sense from this board if they want to work with Enclosure 6. And if we do want to work with Enclosure 6, incorporate that into what Enclosure 5 looks like. And if you want to do what Mr. Fadbean says, if I'm understanding you correctly through the chair to Mr. Fadbean, so for 2011, 2012, rather than this being listed by school by alphabetical order, you would want to know within this list what like, is Riverfield a priority over whatever the project is at North Stratfield? Is that what was that what you were looking for? Or were you?
What I'm
That's
looking
what I
for-
understood it to be. Because I think they prioritized by year already. Are you looking for them then to prioritize within the year?
I think with this, initially within the year. I think
Yes.
it's nice to have a plan, a multi-year plan.
Right.
But every multi-year plan we've had always was modified because of different considerations.
Right.
So I agree we should have a multi-year plan. But my biggest interest and concern is the next fiscal year.
Right.
And that's where we're going to have to, our needs are more imminent, and the action we have to take is more imminent. So my focus is going to be on the next fiscal year, even though I'd like a plan throughout. But the way it's appearing is you want to take 1 year at a time, because this year is going to be difficult.
Right.
The next fiscal year is going to be difficult with the operating budget and with the capital budget. So we can talk about it the other years as much as we want, but our focus should be, in essence, and my focus will be this year.
Right.
So
I
that's, I'm primarily concerned about 2011.
What I would want to see, and if I'd be interested to hear, and other boards members agree, and so that we can give Dr. Title direction on what to do for the next meeting and move off of this subject, would be to incorporate the numbers from 6 into 5, to take 5 and then within a year, look at what it is you would say is a priority within this list. And then we can grow from there, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Mr. Lowe?
Did you want to respond to that?
One other comment.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm clear of the difference between enclosure 5 and enclosure 6. My understanding of enclosure 5, it is the needs with modifying facilities by limited means, rather than the enclosure 6, which has the so-called bricks and mortar, completely do-it-right renovations. Now, they're two different documents. I don't think you got to decide, I think, whether you're going to move forward in the sort of closure 5, which is the pod structure, limited structure to meet certain needs, or whether you're going to move forward to the, what I would call, do it right at no cost.
It's
figure
more
6.
than that, though. It's more than the pod structure. It's when you write an ed spec.
I understand, I know, but we're talking about, can we even get the money for enclosure 5, let alone the money for enclosure 6?
I know it's late, Pete, but we didn't start till 8:15, so we've been here for 2 hours. It's going to be a little later meeting. We're going to move on in a second. You done, Mr. Fatapine? Go ahead.
All right.
You know, no, I'm
As a
I'm
board, you
okay.
got to decide whether you want to prudently move forward the limited pod structure or limited aspect in figure 5, in enclosure 5, or whether as a board you want to move forward with a full-blown renovation, sort of as it should be done, with no expense was concerned, to meet the ed spec. So those are two fundamental different things, so I think you have to make that decision before you move forward with either one. So,
Mr. Carey?
Let me try to explain the genesis of where enclosure 6 came from. We looked at specifically Riverfield, and Riverfield's a 45,000 square foot building. And the recommendation for $6.2 million, including reaching costs, which is code updates when you crack the envelope, is we are going to tear the pod that's in the end of Riverfield, not the new kind of pod, but the 1970s pod. We're going to go right down the middle of it, 7,000 square foot addition. Okay, that makes Riverfield ostensibly a 52,000 square foot building, and it's going to seat 504 kids. And my question to Mr. Cullen was, we just did Stratfield. Stratfield's going to be a 64,000 square foot building. That's what we needed to support 504 kids. So I asked Mr. Cullen, where's my 12,000 square feet? And in response, he said, well, this is really just replaced, and we went back and forth. And what we ended up with was actually not Stratfield or McKinley, but what we ended up with was the deficiencies to run the program is 10 classrooms, I think. Riverfield, let me double check that. It's 10 classrooms. So what we need to run the program that we have for educationally for that number of students at Riverfield is 10 additional classrooms, not the 7. So looking at that and all the additional costs, that to run the program, not in the Taj Mahal biggest Cadillac version, but what's bare minimum necessary so we don't have kids learning in closets, is $8.5 million. So that's the difference between a McKinley or a Burr, or a Sherman, which was by necessity because of Feeman, or Osborne Hill. Does that help answer your question, or did I create more confusion?
Possibly more confusion. If you take your example of Riverfield, under item 6, it's an $8.5 million project.
That's correct.
On item 5, it's a $6.2 million project.
Right. And the difference is 3 classrooms.
And the difference is also how those classrooms are constructed, as I understand it. One is going to be a pod structure, one is going to be a bricks and mortar. We fought this battle many times in the past. And that's why we have pods, because we couldn't successfully achieve the bricks and mortar construction that was wanted. The town was unwilling to fund it. So we can, my point is, we can say we want these things, and I agree we do want them. And I've had said we wanted them in the past. But I have been unsuccessful in the past in achieving those goals. So rather than, I'm trying to learn from my mistakes and trying to do what is achievable, rather than trying to do what is the unachievable. And it's always planned, I like to plan to do what is achievable.
I guess my response to that is twofold, because I'm obviously going to advocate asking for what's necessary. Our job on the Board of Education is not to determine the funding for this. Our job is to determine the need, make sure the need has merit, and that it's not ostentatious, that we're not asking for anything that is beyond what is, minimally necessary. But our job is to identify the need of the community. If we start from a posture of, I'm going to have 6 or 7 classrooms when I need 10 to deliver the program, and I know that I'm creating deficiencies and I'm spending money, I don't feel that's the right way to go. Now, that's my opinion. But again, we all have our roles. The other town bodies have to tell us what they can afford, and they have to measure the need as well. But I will disagree with you that it hasn't happened, because it happened at Stratfield, and it happened just last year at Fairfield Woods. So I'm not as hung up on the type of construction, be it modular or bricks and mortar, as making sure that we have the appropriate space for the students at the buildings, because what happens is we end up building, and I'll give you a perfect example, because we discussed this earlier. We end up spending net, by the time it's done, $8 million on Sherman and Osborne Hill to gain approximately 60 seats. And we have a 900-seat problem in this district. So I can't imagine spending $8 million to gain 60 seats is the best way to solve that problem. Now, granted, we gained a lot of other things, too. We fixed code updates, core, HVAC, hopefully, soon, if we get one more approval. And so there's a lot more that goes into that. But that component has to be part of it. And that's really, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here. What our job is, and I think our job is to speak for the students and the teachers in our community, and I understand that there's a practical reality. That's why I think we have to collaborate with all the other boards in town.
All right, so we need to, I'm sorry, Mr. Liu, you got something?
Just really quick. I mean, the two things that I wanted to say was one is Mr. Fattabine, is I think, for a long time, we've lived sort of in a bubble. We talk a lot about bubbles, don't we? We've lived in a bubble, the Board of Ed, and one of the things that we've discussed in the subcommittee is trying to show, I don't mean educate like we're talking down to them, but show the other bodies in the town what we're up against. We're not, by putting it all out there, we're not necessarily saying we're going to get it all. We want them to understand what we're trying to do, where we're trying to go, and the problem that we're having with what they're proposing in terms of funding. It's not to say that we don't understand the economic climate, et cetera, but it's that type of presentation. And then the other little side comment I'll say is, this is kind of one of the reasons why I just don't think the subcommittees work, because I think if you were in our subcommittee, if we were having this discussion, we would have done it one time, we would have all gotten it. So that's just my little...
Okay, so we're going to stop this conversation now because it's getting late. If board members disagree, I would anticipate at our next meeting, we will have at least on the agenda a motion. It may not be approved that night, but a motion to approve a long-range facilities plan and I think that's what we're going to put on the next agenda. Again, we may not be ready to vote on that. We may have to table it, and we're going to have some further discussion, unless the members think we need to still need to have it as a discussion item. Let's go around quickly, Mr. Fattabine. Well, we're going to discuss it that
I
night.
kind of like the idea that Mrs. Iacona had in terms of giving some definitive direction, if we can get a sense of the body to the superintendent, so that we're not looking at 4 different documents when we get to the motion.
Okay.
And I would go with enclosure 6 to incorporate that into the plan, would be my choice.
Mrs. Albin?
If there's a motion on the floor, we'll be able to discuss it, and if we're ready to approve it, we'll do so, or we'll postpone it.
I would like administration to incorporate 6, so that we can look at that with a motion to vote at the next meeting, if we're prepared to do so.
I would be agreeable to that. Mrs. Zahn?
Either way is fine.
Mrs. Brand?
I actually like enclosure 6. I will also caution, however, we're comparing 6, which probably has some reliable numbers, to 5, which probably doesn't. As Mrs. Iacono said, we're trying to do it. So my recommendation, rather than putting prices, if we move these forward, are actually to have them in order of priority. And at this point in time, not attach a fund with them, because the only piece that we can actually nail, and there are other pieces that go along with the projects that when MGT was looking at it, they were looking at it from an educational perspective. So I would say prioritize it based on, as I said before, the needs that we have in the conditions as to the duration of how long the portables are going to last, conditions of the buildings, enrollment needs and projections and where we're going, and then the educational needs in that order.
Mr. Liu?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone's saying. I think my vote will depend on what I see in front of me.
Mine too. Mr. Fattabine, I neglected to ask you, and I apologize. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, and maybe I just misunderstood. So, that's fine. So that'll be at our next meeting. Okay, thank you. Our second to last item, I think, is the approval of the amendment to the racial imbalance plan. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the amendment to the racial imbalance plan as outlined in the superintendent's letter to the acting Commissioner of Education dated January 13th, 2011. Can I have a motion? Mrs. Iacono, seconded by Mrs. Brand. And I will turn this over to Dr. Teitel. Go ahead, Dr. Teitel.
Well, tomorrow I get to make a return appearance at the Connecticut State Board of Education to discuss our amended plan. If you recall, back in September I got to go, and they sent me back to the drawing board and said, can you try to strengthen it a little bit and come back? And in about 12 hours, I'm going to be there doing this. I think what's in this plan, we discussed as part of the budget process, because it really is about the pre-K. So I don't think there's anything really new in here, but I think somebody suggested, and I think it's a good idea that the board formally endorse it, so when I go to the state board tomorrow, I have your blessing. And I'll come back with my tail between my legs and say, what happened?
Any questions by board members? Mrs. Zahn?
Unfortunately, I can't give you my blessing. I have where to start. Third paragraph, while our plan has resulted in closing the gap, blah, 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 blah. First would be to expand our preschool program for low-income children at Burr. Low-income and minority in my mind are not synonymous. And to me, again, this is a minimal change to appease the State Board of Education, and I can't. I can't do it.
Okay. Any other board members have any questions? Mr. Liu?
Thank you. I guess trying to understand all of this is, I want to understand the preschool part of it first. I mean, what is the, or what is or was the genesis of the purpose of our preschool program, Dr. Teitel?
Well, I wasn't here when it started,
Okay.
but part of it, was to obviously expand preschool services to children that might not otherwise be able to afford them. And secondly, to try to address the racial imbalance issue when the town was put on notice that the racial imbalance was pending, close to the 25 percentage point difference. And the reason that the Burr program is part of that feature is that the desire was that in the event that children go to Burr, and this is open to all children in the community, not just McKinley families, they go to Burr, they like it at Burr, they bond with the other kids, they bond with the families, and they stay at Burr. And that helps racial imbalance. And that, in fact, has worked in a small way. About a quarter of the children that go to Burr end up staying there. So by increasing the number of children in the Burr pre-K program, as we discussed during the budget, we have the staff there, so we don't need to add the staff, and we can increase the likelihood that more children will stay there. So that's the genesis of it. It wouldn't be permissible to offer a program simply to minority children. That would be unconstitutional. But you can offer a program through Title I and through regular to low-income children. So we do have low-income children in the community who are not members of minority groups, and they're welcome, and they do attend our pre-K programs. That's pretty much how it plays out. When I went to the state board the last time, they wanted to see what we could do to enhance our plan, but they only gave us about a month to do something about it. So any grander scheme, any longer range, more deep plan would need to come back for a much bigger discussion and never could have been done in the time frame. So we did, the best thinking that we could, and that's what's the result of this. I don't know that this will get approved. They may say, not good enough, try harder, and we'll be back with more ideas, but this is in a short period of time how we tried to put it together.
So, having kids at Burr, it's helping, I guess, doing some integration, but it's helping their level of education at a preschool level, trying to raise that?
Correct. It's got two purposes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess my question is, well then, how does moving the McKinley preschool kids to the ECC at the Ward High School, how does that help the McKinley preschool students?
Right. So this is a quirk in the way they calculate minority children. First, we think that, as we talked about during the budget process, that the ECC program at Ward High School is a really good program, and that it's right in the same neighborhood as McKinley, and so McKinley families that wish to go to pre-K in the neighborhood still have that option available to them. So we haven't really reduced their opportunities. And if they're willing to travel to Burr, we've increased their opportunities. But because a disproportionate number of families who attend the McKinley preschool are members of minority groups, it drives the McKinley number up. The percentage of minority children, the way they calculate it, includes the pre-K.
Right.
See, when the state looks at your school and says, what's the percent minority in a school, they include the pre-K in that number. So by moving the pre-K out of McKinley to Ward, it's better educationally on the one hand, and secondly, it helps the numbers in the way they calculate it. So they would only then calculate on the K-5 figure. So it's a technicality. That's probably not going to have a gigantic impact, but it would have some, and we're very close to being in compliance. Remember, we're within 1 percentage point here, and so what I'm trying to say is that, while we may want to come up with a grander scheme to really knock this number way down, a radical solution at this point isn't necessarily warranted because we're within 1 percentage point of being, in compliance, and any other solution is going to require a lot more community discussion and input than I can muster together in a month.
I still, though, I guess the part that I'm not understanding is how does it help educationally the McKinley kids going to the ECC
as great a program as the ECC is, and I'm completely behind it, how does it help the preschool kids educationally? Excuse me?
Well, first of all, it's not just McKinley kids, right? Because it's the program is housed at McKinley, but kids from anywhere in the district can go to it if they qualify, right? So it's still designed for low-income children, but of course, for McKinley families, it's an attractive spot. The space at McKinley that we use for preschool is really substandard. It's the teacher's lounge, right? It's very limited. It's not a space designed for pre-K at all, and the space at the ECC at Ward is beautiful for that. It's designed for that, all these extra facilities right there. So I think this has a benefit educationally, and it has an ancillary benefit in terms of racial imbalance.
I just still have, I guess I'd really like to see more than something as simple as this, is some type of rationale or study of how these lower income preschool kids that some are coming from McKinley or from that area are going to be are going to be in a better educational environment at the ECC. I don't put that, I can't understand that. It's not to say that the ECC is not a great program, but how does that really work?
You want to get into that now?
I just guess we're dealing with two groups that are struggling. You just sort of earmarked the low-income kids who are trying to, we're trying to give them a leg up with some preschool starting, and you've got the ECC who are trying to get a leg up with this great program. Usually you're trying to put one group who needs a leg up with a group that's got their leg up already, and they're hoping to rub off on each other. How is the preschool?
Okay, so and there's another component to the ECC program at Ward, and that is what we call typical peers.
Typical what?
Typical peers. That is, and by the way, I also want to make clear that just because somebody is a low-income child doesn't mean they're not a typically developing peer.
No.
Right,
no,
okay, so I just want to
you
be
had-
clear.
You had said that they're low-income kids, and they were, okay.
Right, but on top of that, we're also making seats available to non-low-income kids who will pay a tuition right, to go to the ECC program. So you'll have three groups there. You will have low-income children who can't afford, essentially, a pre-K program that will benefit from the pre-K program. You'll have the special needs population that is there, and you'll have the typically developing non-low-income peers who are there on a tuition basis. So you will have the benefit of all three of those groups together in a space that's appropriate with a very favorable adult-to-child ratio, and really developing. The other piece to this will be, I talked about last time, is that being able to get students in there as 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, as opposed to just having 4-year-olds. That we're really trying to make a move with these children, then including the 3-year-olds in the program is also a benefit and does comport with best practices. So that's another benefit to the whole thing. So I think it does have merits educationally, but at this point it's part of the racial imbalance is the little piece here. So anyway, there are other people there. It's not just the low income plus the special needs. It's low income, special needs, and then another clump.
And so the other part of it is that you're definitely moving these kids for racial imbalance.
Well, it has that benefit.
Okay. And don't we already have sort of a racial or tipping towards that direction at the Ward site?
Not nearly, no, not anything close to McKinley. Nothing that would tip it into racial imbalance for one thing, and in a quirk of the way it's calculated, an early childhood program in a high school is not included in the figures.
Okay.
So they wouldn't count anyways, and Ward's not even close to being, out of compliance. It's McKinley and then everybody else.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Mrs. Brand?
Why didn't we consider, say, Dwight? The enrollment's low. We're trying to encourage kids to go to a different site.
Right.
And I'm,
We did.
Folks know, I mean, my concern is that I consider the high school prime real estate right now. And
I
that's
know,
why
we're
I'm
going to get into
wondering-
this whole, high school overcrowding issue again.
No, this isn't, no, but I didn't want to not,
I know.
I mean, I've been upfront about that. But my point is that it isn't even so much about that. If Burr is working so well or it has any impact at all in that same thinking, putting kids up at a high school location with ECC or not ECC, part of the racial imbalance part is supposed to, at least the way I understood it, improve educational opportunities and have the kids move out. And if we're doing Burr, to me, then the consistent approach would then be also to consider Dwight.
Right, okay, so there were several other options that were considered.
I think just for the record, we had this discussion during the budget, but if
It's-
we're going to do
it's
it again,
Groundhog
I'm going to
Day.
limit it to about a minute, because we're moving on.
There-
Well, then, you weren't listening, we discussed it.
All right, so, let me just get in the middle of
Point
this.
of order, Mr. Chairman, we did not discuss the racial imbalance plan during the budget process. We discussed the
discussed the-
move, but not relative to the racial
all right.
imbalance.
And that,
All right,
I
let
think
Miss-
that
let
was
Dr. Titleman
very
answer the
rude of you to
question.
just say it like that, to say I wasn't listening.
Point of
Come on,
order,
John.
Mr. Chairman. I move to call a question.
I am going to allow Mrs. Brand to ask a couple more questions, and then we're going to move on.
No, I actually think Dr. Title was just, he answered that you did consider more
Yeah,
sites, but
we did. We also were looking at this in terms of what the budgetary impact would be, since our budget, we know, is going to be tight. We're also concerned about moving all the early childhood options way over to the other side of town, because a lot of the families who do take advantage of this live in the McKinley district. We do not have space at Dwight or Burr to do both programs in one building. There would have been advantages to that potentially, but they don't have space on the first floor. And so our transportation costs would go through the roof, because we'd have to transport it out to Dwight, we'd have to transport it out to Burr. We would not be able to save the $100,000 that we were able to save in the budget by consolidating the programs. So we couldn't put them all in one school. We're going to have to transport the kids that take advantage of this all the way to the other side of town. It's not a, so that's, we looked at it, but it made more sense to put it at Ward, we thought.
thank you for the explanation.
Mr. Carey?
You're welcome.
Yeah, very briefly, I mentioned in a previous meeting that Ms. Leonardi was very kind to give me a tour of the ECC last year. And in terms of, and I've seen the preschool space at McKinley and Burr. But in terms just for board members to visualize, when we visited Winterberry in Dr. Title's old district, and it was the pre-K through, I think it was 3 school, Dr. Title? It was
Pre-KK.
Pre-KK. It was designed just for little folks.
Yep.
That's what the ECC is. So in terms of if you can visualize what you saw at Winterberry, the ECC is the closest thing we have to that in our community. And I feel that, that in itself, and it being designed specifically for smaller people, it lends itself to it. Now, I do understand also that there were budgetary concerns. We saved $100,000. We're not having to have as, we have more sessions, less teachers, all that. But that is an important thing to conceptualize, and I would invite the other board members to go look at the ECC, because I think if you see the space and see some of the really neat stuff that our maintenance team has done to build, smaller cubes and things like that for our students there, you'll get a better understanding of why that space is really ideal for preschool.
Thank you. Are we ready to vote? Okay. And we're going to have public comment. If I got a little stippy, I apologize. And I do. So, we're ready to vote. Public comment on this issue?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, you might need a motion to extend.
Oh, no, we're not going to need that. I'll wait till about, well, we'll see what happens, Mrs. Zahn. I got about 8 more minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, Richard Jocelyn, live in Carriage Drive in Southport. Thank you for letting me speak in public. I'm also a task force member for the Racial Imbalance Plan, so I might make a comment as a member. The expansion of the preschool capacity of Burr for low-income students, will the district pay for these low-income students to be transported to the preschool? Obviously, we're trying to increase the capacity and get them there, but will they pay for it? Second question, what is the annual cost once these kids do choose to matriculate. If it's 9 kids, that's going to be for 12 years of busing. What is the cost embedded into the plan? The MGT report cites a deficiency in space for the pre-K at Burr. How is this addressed, especially if you're expanding the capacity? The second option is the opt-out of McKinley to Dwight. I'm familiar with Dwight. Apparently, this was discussed at the Racial Imbalance Task Force. The opt-out to Dwight wouldn't be permitted if a section would be created. So it's a push me, pull you. If you can come, but you can't come if you create a section. So it seems to me to be undercut the possibility of success of the plan. The last thing is the McKinley to ECC. I, fortunately, am very familiar with the ECC. And I think right now about 130 kids attend ECC, of which 40 or 50 are typical, about 20 or 30 are drop-in type services, and then the rest are all full-time students who are more impaired. My information is that the 20 kids who would be added to McKinley would be not additive. In other words, 20 of the typical kids wouldn't go, and 20 of the minority and the low income would then attend. So there's no, likely to get confirmation that would not be increasing the population of students on site. Just as my opinion is that peers are the best model for other peers that are not typically developing. They model the behavior and they also model language. By bringing 20 new students who some will be minorities who have language deficiencies, these will be inferior peer models, in my opinion, and I question how the special ed kids will be improved by the addition of these minority students to the reverse mainstream. The last thing, obviously, is embedded into the long-term planning is a $4 million high school improvement. I just would recommend that we think about space. As we all know that ECC and special education is not a place. It's a service. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We ready to vote on this? Yes, Mr. Liu.
Just one last thing. I think what Mr. Johnson said was very eloquent, and I think for those reasons, also for the reason that I think that, I mean, I hate that this is not the 11th hour, and I wish that, unfortunately, Dr. Title, that you had given us more time to go over this instead of having to do it at this particular time, but I don't feel this plan is ready, and I think it's got some flaws in it, so I will not be voting for it tonight.
Something if this gets turned down.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? All right. All in favor? It's Mr. Fatabeen, Mr. Carey, Ms. Albin, Ms. Iacono, myself, all against. Against Mrs. Zahn, Mrs. Brand, and Mr. Liu. Okay. Passes 5-3.
Mr. Chair, point of order, we're coming up to our deadline. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules and extend the meeting for 5 minutes.
Sure. You think we have to? Okay. Have a motion, second. A motion, all in favor, 5 minutes, raise your hand. All right. We have public comment and petitions. During this period, the board will hear comments and receive petitions from any citizen present at the meeting. Any single presentation must be limited to 2 minutes, and audio-visual equipment cannot be used without the advance authorization of the chairman. The board will not hear comment on individual personal matters or comments addressed to a specific member of the board. Decorum will be enforced. Citizens are asked to comment on any voting item at the time the item is under consideration by the board. Yes. You're up first. Go ahead.
I only have 2 minutes, so you don't
That's
have
right.
to worry. This meeting began on a real high, as Mrs. Albin pointed out. We heard a long-term mission plan for Fairfield. And then from there, we sort of went in a different direction. I'm a history teacher, and I've been in your town for a very long time. So I have a very different perspective of what the problem is with the community funding you besides the fiscal issue. During my tenure here, there was a time when boards of ed had long-range projections, demographics, what the current need was, and what the future need would be. And then that sort of went by the wayside. And then there are a lot of people in this community that still have the memory that I have. 4 elementary schools closed in 1 year, an announcement made in November like that. Then we closed 1 high school. Then we made the other high school a middle school. Then we decided to have another high school, but it took us 5 years to make that decision. And I think when you talk about educating the community, you have to start by showing them credibility. I think that is one of your major problems. So you need to come forward first with a long-range plan that convinces this community that those buildings that you want to build really need to be built. That's where you start. That's how you win them over, and that's how you get the cash, because they've seen it go a different way, and there's a lack of trust. But that's just my humble opinion. Thank you.
J. Alfred Dunn. Unfortunately, I didn't bring my pajamas, so I'll be quick.
Toothbrush?
I really owe you municipal patriots an apology. Last time I was here, I ridiculed you or assailed you concerning a $500,000 cut. At that particular time, I was unaware that 2 fugitives, common sense and logic, had been embraced with a passion reserved only for lovers. What happened was that early start or late start was crushed. 3 groups profited by that movement. I was one of them because I was against it from the start. So were the high school students. They were against it. Also, the board, in making that cut, did not bring about any incursion on the educational situation. And the last group, the sponsors. Now they can be able to eat 2 squares a day as against 1. Used to be 3, but that went out in 2008. It became a luxury. And I'm overjoyed that someone had the fortitude to take care of the whimsy and the whimsical. Thank you. Oh, one thing more. When you talk about different economic situations and whatnot, one side of this town has the potential of accommodating the lower paycheck. The other side is strictly plantation. Financially disheveled and chromatically incarcerated is one group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tina DeJarnette, 35 Quaker Lane, and I'll be quick. I have to get up and teach your children in the morning. And I know you hear a lot of complaints and a lot of nasty things. You are appreciated for what you do. You have a very hard job. And hopefully this won't come off in a wrong way. I fully believe in preventive maintenance and proactive. So when I hear about, warranties for the roofs, that sounds awesome. When I hear at the budget meeting that they put new windows in at Dwight and that saved money on the heating, that's awesome to me. Going into your long-range facilities, I heard Mrs. Albin when she said, we're going to build the Taj Mahal, we're going to get the flack. The flack comes from people like me where we see, what do you mean Ludlow needs a new air conditioner? How old's that building? What do you mean Ludlow needs new siding? How old's that building? What do you mean Burr needs this again? So when you look at it, I know we need it. I teach in this town. I live in this town. I have kids in these schools. I know that what the needs are. But go to your parents and say, we need the money, but we're not asking for the state-of-the-art HVAC system. And also, look at grants. I worked in a school system in Virginia before here. A private man gave an entire computer lab to the school. Okay, my aunt, who is no longer with us, Board of Ed Darien, Board of Ed Waterbury, worked for a company in Washington DC, not the Department of Education, but another one, who gave grants to school systems. Look for grants. Go to your parents and say, we found this money. Will you match it? Just like when your kid comes to you and says, I want a new car. I saved $3,000. Will you help me out? So I appreciate your time. I appreciate what you do. I know it's going to be hard, but there's a will, there's a way, but you have to go to the money people and say, we're bringing this money in. You can't go in and ask for 80,000, because I kind of noticed on number 6, the middle schools and high schools aren't even there. Number 6 is just the elementary schools. Sorry.
Richard Jocelyn, Carriage Drive, Southport. In the Prismatic report, there was a conclusion by the experts that the cause for the achievement gap at McKinley was caused by the failure to afford equitable educational resources. As a layperson, I hope that you, as a board, can address this observation. Thank you.
Good evening, or I should say good night. Kristen McCarthy-Vahey, RTM District 6. And I'd like to talk for just, well, less than 2 minutes about the long-range facilities plan. I urge you to pass a plan. I urge you to prioritize clearly, to come to consensus together, to give us, the bodies who will pass through and who you will have to come before, and hopefully people will be respectful and polite, to give us your vision, to let us know what you need, and recognize that what you see as needs, reasonable people will disagree. However, we need your vision. We need that. I agree completely that the town bodies need to come together. It's my hope, and I will, believe me, encourage and continue to push for conversations that will go farther than the one that we had that the Board of Finance put together at the beginning of the year. But I really hope, in whatever way it is, whether you have whatever dollar amounts you decide to use, at least to be able to communicate to the various boards what it is you see as the first needs, and to bring that to us. So I support you in your work. I know that no matter what you do, you will be criticized. The first selectman, when he gave out the green sheet, as we call it, with the capital plan, the Board of Finance was joking about it in the other room. You know, every time they talk about it, they give him a hard time. But people are grateful that he's at least done that. And we may disagree with the numbers that he has put on it, but it's a place to start. You're the place where we start. And I urge you to take action on this. And if it takes a few meetings, great. But to come to a consensus, give us your vision, and we'll work together. Thank you.
And the last item on the agenda is open board comment. Do we have anything?
I do, there's 30 seconds.
This meeting is officially adjourned.
Right. It is.
Yep, you're right.
11:05.
All right, I'll save it for next time, but this is really awesome.
Thank you.
So, good job.
Good night.
I'll remind me, I'll